Echoes of hope. A dissonant shriek of static, a malicious chorus of cosmic interference, shredded the comms array at Unified Earth Command in Geneva. Technician Alara Reyes, her vision blurred after a double shift, almost wrote it off as routine solar activity, but threaded within the grating noise, a fragile coherence struggled to be heard. A voice, female, desperate, fractured, that hopes. Stand. KRYLL, overrun. Alara's fingers danced across the console, isolating the signal, scrubbing away the excess noise. The voice, edging into clarity, dripped with raw terror. Rationing, collapsed, children, starving. Her pulse hammered a frantic rhythm in her chest, a genuine distress signal. Rare as it was, most were automated, lifeless alerts from probes or forgotten mining operations. This was different. Bleeding humanity. She routed the garbled transmission to Central Command, a knot of dread twisting in her stomach. The voice continued its agonizing recital, punctuated by bursts of static and the low thrum of what sounded like distant cataclysms. Energy grid failed. KRYLL, everywhere. A shiver prickled Alara's skin. The KRYLL, the very utterance of their name conjured nightmares. Merciless, brutal, efficient, they devoured worlds, not solely for sustenance, but for the savage thrill of domination. The line went dead, leaving only the oppressive hum of static in its wake. Alara stared, the fragmented pleas echoing in the hollows of her mind. Hope's stand, she breathed, the name a cruel mockery. Upstairs, the transmission's remnants underwent rigorous dissection within the sterile war room's confines. Arrayed around the gleaming mahogany table sat a cadre of officers, their faces disciplined into masks of composure. General Marcus Thorne, his face a roadmap of past conflicts, fixed a steely gaze forward. "Run that last segment again," he commanded, his voice a gravelly baritone that tolerated no dissent. The technician complied, the broken voice echoing once more. This time, Thorne tuned his senses, not to the words themselves, but to the background cacophony. The rhythm of the explosions, the unique signature of energy weapon discharges, echoes from 1,000 forgotten battlegrounds. Confirmed, he declared, a grim finality in his tone. KRYLL military imprint, heavy ordnance. A wave of weary resignation rippled around the table. Hopes stand on a mote of dust on the galactic tapestry, a forgotten colony clinging to the fringe of explored space. Casualty projections? Director Anya Sharma inquired, her voice betraying none of the turmoil she undoubtedly felt. Based on the latest census figures, Lieutenant Commander Chen responded, his fingers gliding across his datapad. Approximately 5,000 civilians, primarily engaged in agriculture and supporting families. Strategic importance? Sharma pressed, her gaze unwavering. Chen hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his features. Insignificant. Director Hope's stand possesses limited resources and no strategic position. Functionally, it is an agricultural hub, producing nominal output that we derive negligible gains beyond routine shipments of harvested resources. Sharma offered a slow nod, her expression unreadable. Therefore, a rescue operation would be unfeasible. The term hung in the balance, laden with unacknowledged acceptance. Unfeasible. A thin veil concealing the truth of expendability. Justification for abandoning 5,000 souls to a barbaric fate. Thorne's fist crashed against the polished surface, the sound reverberating through the room's enforced quiet. Unfeasible? These are human lives at stake. Director. Women. Children. Are we prepared to consign them to the KRYLL's mercy? Sharma fixed Thorne with an icy stare. General, with respect, our resources are at their limit. That we are engaged in a multi-front war. Every vessel, every soldier, represents a vital asset. Redirecting resources to a low-priority colony is an unwise allocation of force. Unwise. Thorne scoffed, scorn lacing his voice. Is that our new language? Choosing to safeguard human lives equates to recklessness. At what point did our values become so eroded? We are not lacking in compassion, General, Sharma replied, her voice sharpening with steel. We are pragmatic. We must prioritize the needs of the many ahead of the select few. And who defines the select few? Thorne challenged, his eyes blazing with indignation. Who decides which lives matter more than others? Because I recall an oath to protect all of humanity, not merely the strategically valuable. The argument intensified, a familiar pas de deux of morality versus practicality, of basic human decency versus cold, calculated strategy. Thorne found himself growing estranged, his objections lost amidst the chorus of bureaucratic detachment. "General," Sharma stated, a chilling neutrality in her voice, "I acknowledge your concerns, but the decision has been finalized that Hope's stand is regrettable, but it does not justify a rescue operation." Thorne stared in disbelief, his face a tableau of shock and anger. "So, that's it? We simply condemn them all to die?" Sharma remained silent, her gaze frozen on the holographic display at the table's center. Thorne shoved back his chair, the screeching sound slicing through the room's tense atmosphere. "Then consider this my resignation," he declared, his voice ringing with resolve. "I will not be a participant in this decision, that I will not remain silent as 5,000 innocents are butchered because they are labeled unfeasible." A collective gasp swept through the room. Resignation was unheard of, especially for an officer of Thorne's standing. That it was professional suicide, a brazen declaration against the establishment. "General, you are making a grave mistake," Sharma stated, her voice laced with warning. "Perhaps," Thorne responded, his eyes hardening, "but I will be unable to exist knowing I could have intervened. That I may not be able to guarantee their safety, but I will not abandon them without a fight." He turned and strode toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the hushed room. Pausing in the doorway, he cast one last, searing look at the assembled officers. "You may have forsaken them," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "but I have not, and I vow this. The KRYL will atone for their actions. They will anyone who hinders my path." Then he was gone, leaving behind stunned silence and a sudden awareness that the world had irrevocably shifted. Meanwhile, light years away on Hope's stand, Anya Petrova knelt beside Elder Kai, her heart heavy as stone. The energy shield had collapsed hours prior, and KRYL forces massed at the settlement's periphery, their guttural screeches resonating across the once serene valley. The Elder, his face a tapestry of a century's worth of stories, reached out and clasped her hand, his grip surprisingly strong amidst his frailness. "Do not surrender to despair, Anya," he whispered, his voice like rustling leaves. "Even amidst the blackest night, the stars still endure." Anya raised her gaze to the heavens, her vision blurred by tears. The stars shone brilliantly, diamonds scattered across the void, but seemed impossibly remote, beyond reach. "But Elder," she choked, "we have been forsaken. No help is forthcoming." The Elder smiled, a weak, ethereal expression that transcended the encroaching horror. "Abandoned by some, perhaps, but not by all. There remains hope, Anya, always." His eyes closed, his breathing shallow and ragged. Anya remained by his side, grasping his hand tightly, drawing courage from his unwavering belief. Suddenly, the earth shuddered, followed by a deafening roar. Anya looked up in terror as a KRYL dropship descended, its menacing silhouette eclipsing the starlight. "They are here," she whispered, her voice barely registering. "It is over." Yet, as despair threatened to engulf her, a spark of defiance ignited. She would not yield. She would not permit the KRYL to extinguish the last flicker of hope. She rose, her eyes burning with resolve. "For Hope's stand," she cried, her voice ringing across the valley. "For all of humanity." And then, she charged towards the enemy, a solitary figure against insurmountable odds, her heart fueled by a desperate, unwavering hope. Back on Earth, Alara Reyes monitored the news feeds with mounting dread. The official reports were oblique, sanitized, but the stark reality lay beneath the deceptive gloss. Hope's stand was under siege, and no assistance was mobilized. She recalled the fractured distress call, the desperate voice pleading for rescue. She remembered General Thorne's face, etched with anger and determination. Suddenly, a new alert flashed on her console that a rogue transmission, originating from an unsanctioned source. Hesitating a heartbeat, she clicked on the icon. The screen flickered to life, displaying Thorne's face, his expression grim but resolute. "This is General Marcus Thorne," he stated, his voice clear, and unwavering. To any vessels within range, I am initiating a private rescue operation to Hope's stand. That I require volunteers, that I require ships, that I require anyone who still embraces the sanctity of human life. He paused, his gaze intense. This is a suicide mission that we will face overwhelming opposition. But if we do nothing, 5,000 innocents will perish. The choice rests with you. Alara stared, her heart pounding. It was madness, sheer lunacy. Yet, as Thorne spoke, a spark of hope flared within her, a spark dormant for too long. She looked at the console, her fingers hovering above the keys. She knew what she had to do. She knew what was righteous. Drawing a deep breath, she began to reroute the transmission, amplifying the signal, broadcasting it across every channel, every frequency, every corner of the galaxy. Echoes of hope spread, carried on the wings of a desperate plea, a defiant act of courage, and an unyielding faith in the enduring strength of the human spirit, the unconventional general. The Council's holographic visages, a tapestry of skepticism, pique, and outright condemnation, bore into Thorne. His resignation, still tender in its impact, was further irritated by the lingering sting of Director Sharma's curt dismissal. That he stood resolute, bracing himself. "General Thorne," Admiral Hayes began, her voice a honed blade, her posture a testament to her inflexibility. "With all due respect, your assessment smacks of sentimentality to Hope's stand, a pittance to drain. Allocating precious resources to such a quixotic venture is strategically bankrupt and fiscally irresponsible." Thorne's jaw tightened, the impulse to explode restrained. "Those are people, Admiral. Our responsibility, we swore an oath. An oath binding us to the Coalition's paramount interests," Hayes retorted, eyes like chips of ice. "Hope's stand doesn't register. Resources are finite. Their impact must be maximized. What impact eclipses the salvation of lives?" Thorne shot back, his tone gaining an edge. He caught a flicker of something akin to commiseration in General Okoro's eyes, a man he'd known for decades. Pity, as though he'd finally snapped. He inhaled deeply, striving for composure. This wasn't about winning points. It was about preventing a tragedy. "We're not discussing a handful of souls," he pressed, his voice steady yet firm. "This is a community, built on the Coalition's promise. Families, children, braving the void to forge a life. Are we simply consigning them to the KRYLL?" Hayes remained unmoved. "The KRYLL are a perpetual menace. Resources squandered on a rescue dilute our ability to fortify against future incursions. That it's a question of priorities." That word, prioritizing, landed like a gut punch. A bloodless, bureaucratic term that masked the brutal arithmetic of abandonment. It dredged up a specter from the past, a wound thought sealed, now weeping anew. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Cerberus Bridge was a chaotic tableau of alarms and frantic commands. Light pulsed like a dying star. Thorne, then a captain, gripped his command chair, knuckles stark white. KRYLL had sprung their trap. Shields buckled. The hull groaned. "Situation," he barked, his voice rough. Asterisk, "taking brutal fire, Captain." Lieutenant Park yelled from tactical. "Shields plummeting. Breach, Section 4. Asterisk. Asterisk. Thorne, in a split second, made a brutal calculation, born of desperation and a sliver of hope. "Divert all power to forward shields. Prep for hyperspace jump." Asterisk. Asterisk. "Captain," Park protested, aghast. "Escape pods? They're not launched." Asterisk. Thorne hesitated, caught between damnation and salvation. Ejecting pods meant sacrificing shield integrity, potentially condemning the Cerberus and all aboard. Yet, leaving his crew. Unthinkable. He scanned his crew, their faces mirroring fear and pleading for guidance. A young ensign trembled, a seasoned veteran manned his post, a medic struggled to keep up with the injured and dying. Asterisk. His decision was agonizing, swift. "Power to shields. Jump." Asterisk. The Cerberus juddered, agonizingly, as it tore into hyperspace, leaving behind a landscape of devastation. They survived. But at what price? The pods remained locked. The subsequent inquest was swift, cold. He was absolved, his actions deemed justified. But his own judgment was far more brutal that he saw their faces still, heard their silent cries in the dead of night. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The memory struck with ferocious force, as though he were reliving it. He could almost taste the acrid tang of burnt metal, hear the keening of alarms, feel the crushing weight of command, a burden he'd carried ever since, shaping him, hardening him, driving his resolve to protect those under his charge. This isn't resource allocation, Admiral, Thorn countered, his voice measured yet resolute, hauling himself back to the present. This is about life, singular, precious lives. Sentiment is a luxury we cannot indulge in times of war, General. Hayes snapped, her voice laced with disdain. We fight for the Coalition's survival. Sacrifices are inevitable. And who dictates those sacrifices? Thorn challenged, fire in his gaze. You, Sharma? Do you sit comfortably, deciding which lives are expendable? Do you sleep soundly, knowing you've sentenced innocents to death? Hayes's hollow image flickered, barely perceptibly, a telltale sign of her rising ire. That's enough, General, she cut in. Your insubordination verges on treason. Treason, Thorn scoffed. Treason is abandoning our own to the KRYLL. Treason is betraying the very ideals we profess to uphold. He turned to the others, his gaze moving across their faces. I understand the strategic calculus, he stated, voice more even. I comprehend the risks, but we cannot stand by as Hope's stand is annihilated. We have a moral imperative that we must exhaust every recourse. And what, pray tell, do you propose? Okoro queried, his voice laced with the same weariness Thorn felt. We're stretched to the breaking point that we lack the capacity for a full-blown operation. Then we adapt, Thorn replied, a spark of his former self reigniting. We cobble together ships, rally volunteers, and we go that we might not rescue everyone. But damn it, we'll try. Hayes gave a derisive snort. A rogue mission, led by a disgraced general? It's madness, Thorn, suicide. Perhaps, Thorn conceded. But it's also the right thing. And sometimes, Admiral, the right thing is worth everything, even our lives. He knew the odds were stacked against him. The Council wouldn't endorse this, not with Hayes so adamantly opposed. But he wouldn't relent. Not this time that he had failed before. The specter of that failure always haunted him. Never again he would exhaust every possibility to save Hope's stand, even if it meant insubordination, professional ruin, and the Coalition's full fury. He exited the hollow conference room. The weight of his decision a palpable burden that he knew what he must do. He'd resigned his commission, but not the fight that he would assemble his own armada, his own crew, and set course for Hope's stand. With or without official sanction, as he moved through the sterile corridors of Central Command, a fragile ember of hope flickered to life. He didn't know what horrors awaited on Hope's stand, but he couldn't remain idle. He had a purpose, a debt to settle. He was the maverick, the rule breaker, the one who prioritized humanity over protocol, and he was ready for the fight. Reaching his quarters, he activated a secure channel to his loyalists. Ready my ship, he commanded, his voice etched with determination. We're going to Hope's stand. The reply was instant, unwavering. Yes, sir. He terminated the connection and gazed out the viewport at the distant tapestry of stars, a silent vow forming. They think no one is coming, he whispered. They are wrong. Assembling the ragtag fleet. Orange tears of rust streaked down the Dauntless, staining the docking mechanisms with a bilious hue. Thorn's gloved palm traced the aged battleship's flank. The metal emitted a mournful groan, a dirge for its former glory. Decommissioned, gutted of her primary weapons, the derelict awaiting the inevitable kiss of the plasma torch. The drydock's recycled air, thick with the staleness of stagnation and lost causes, filled his lungs. This broken-down bucket was the Coalition's magnanimous gift. He'd not anticipated fanfares, but the sharp barb of their deliberate neglect still stung. A handful of obsolete warships, deemed fit only for scrap, a token allowance of fuel. The subtext reverberated. Fail, and you're on your own. Inspiring, wouldn't you say, General? The voice dripped with sardonic levity, belonging to Lieutenant Commander Davies, his temporary shadow. Fresh from the academy, Davies radiated discomfort with his assignment. Thorn pivoted, a mirthless grin etching itself onto his face. She possesses, Character will be leaning heavily on that, considering her distinct lack of teeth. He indicated the skeletal remains of a plasma cannon, its housing scarred and gutted. Davies, I require a full damage assessment. Every system, from the reactor's heart to the humblest life support pump. Davies snapped a salute, rigid and textbook perfect. Aye, sir. Thorne moved on, scrutinizing the Valiant, a light cruiser adorned with flaking layers of paint, and the Resolute, a frigate missing a substantial portion of its sensory apparatus. Each vessel whispered tales of past campaigns and hard-won victories, now demoted to an inglorious demise. Yet, within these metallic husks, Thorne discerned potential, the lingering echoes of valor and sacrifice, and above all, a flicker of hope for Hope's stand that he needed a crew, not just warm bodies, but a band of rebels willing to flout protocol, to stare into the abyss and scoff at the coalition's bureaucratic apathy. While they'd abandoned Hope's stand, Thorne knew kindred spirits remained, individuals who valued lives above political maneuvering. He only had to find them. His first call went to Zara Khan. After 3 torturous rings, Khan's visage materialized on the screen, her dark eyes sharp and analytical. She occupied a bare-bones apartment, a precarious tower of datapads teetering on a nearby table. Thorne, she greeted, her tone cool and detached. Word travels fast about your departure. Let's call it a strategic reassessment of priorities, Thorne countered, keeping his tone breezy. I need a pilot, Zara. The best there is, someone willing to dance on the edge of the rulebook. Khan arched an eyebrow, amusement glinting in her gaze. Dance? You're planning a full-blown demolition of it, aren't you? Hope's stand needs rescuing. The coalition won't come. I am. Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken calculations. Thorne could practically feel Khan assessing the risks, the opportunities. Her reputation preceded her. Viper Khan, they christened her, audacious, fearless, and utterly lethal in a cockpit. She also possessed an unwavering loyalty, a trait that had previously landed her in boiling water. What kind of birds are we talking about? She finally inquired, the edge melting from her voice. Thorne grimaced. Less than ideal. Decommissioned relics, scavenged parts. If we can get them space-worthy, it'll be a goddamned miracle. Khan chuckled, a low, resonant sound. Sounds like my kind of challenge. I'm in, but I want command of the fighter wing, unfettered autonomy. Granted, Thorne replied without hesitation. He knew she wouldn't accept anything less. Report to Drydock Gamma. The Valiant awaits its Viper. The connection severed. Relief surged through Thorne that he had his pilot. Now for an engineer. Locating Marcus Sparky, Jones proved engaging. Jones wasn't actively evading detection, but he was entrenched within the labyrinthine depths of the Coalition's central engineering depot. Thorne discovered him amidst a maelstrom of wires, circuit boards, and dismembered drones. The air crackled with electrostatic energy, laced with the pungent tang of ozone. Jones, a sinewy figure perpetually adorned with grease smudges and sporting a chaotic shock of vermilion hair, remained oblivious to Thorne's approach. He was engrossed in soldering a microscopic component, his tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth in concentration. Jones, Thorne called, pitching his voice above the cacophony of machinery. Jones startled, nearly fumbling his soldering iron. He whirled around, his eyes magnified and unfocused behind thick lenses. General Thorne. What brings you to this particular corner of hell? I need an engineer, someone who can breathe life into obsolete machines, someone capable of performing miracles with baling wire and blind faith. Jones blinked. Baling wire? I'm partial to nanofiber sealant, but I understand the sentiment. A grin flashed across his face, a burst of manic energy. General, you've come to the right madman. I'm your fixer. Thorne surveyed the organized chaos surrounding him. I'm beginning to see that. Tell me, Jones, can you resurrect a squadron of decommissioned warships? Resurrect? Bit of a stretch, but I can certainly render them operational, mostly. Jones grabbed a handful of wires, twisting them together with practiced ease. The Dauntless, the Valiant, the Resolute. I've glanced at the blueprints. They're old, but they've got good bones. With some coaxing, we can get them to sing one last song. Thorne couldn't suppress a smile that he had his miracle worker. Now he just needed someone to ground him. One more thing, Jones, Thorne added. I'm assigning you a technician, fresh out of the academy. Name's Ren. Jones scowled. A technician? I'm a lone wolf. General, too many hands spoil the flux capacitor. Ren's eager to learn, and he's got a knack for diagnostics. Trust me, you'll appreciate him. Jones sighed dramatically. Fine, but if he slows me down, he's swimming home. Thorne located Ren hovering anxiously near the depot's entrance, clutching a data pad like a lifeline. The young man appeared pale and jittery, clearly overawed by the prospect of collaborating with the infamous Sparky Jones. Ren, Thorne said, approaching. You're assigned to Chief Engineer Jones. He's unconventional, but he's the best damn engineer in the fleet. Observe everything, absorb every detail, and don't be afraid to ask questions, even stupid ones. Ren gulped audibly. Yes, sir, but I've heard stories about Mr. Jones. He's a lot. He is, but he's also a genius. Just steer clear when he's wielding a plasma torch. Thorne clapped Ren on the shoulder. Good luck, son. You'll require it. He left Ren standing there, a blend of trepidation and exhilaration etched across his features, and strode back towards the Dauntless. The dry dock buzzed with activity, the screech of welding torches and the clang of metal reverberating through the vast space. Khan had already arrived, issuing rapid-fire instructions to a team of mechanics as they disassembled a fighter drone. Jones remained elusive, but Thorne could pinpoint the unmistakable sounds of his ministrations emanating from within the Resolute. Thorne stepped onto the bridge of the Dauntless, the command chair icy and unyielding beneath his touch. The view screen flickered to life, projecting a panoramic vista of the dry dock, his makeshift fleet. His last-ditch gamble. He conjured images of Hope's Stand, of families huddled in makeshift shelters, praying for deliverance. He recalled the stony countenances of the council members, their eyes devoid of empathy. He wrestled with his own past blunders, the ghosts that haunted his waking hours. He would not fail again. He activated the comm system, his voice resonating through the hollow corridors of the Dauntless. This is General Thorne. All personnel, report to your assigned stations. We have a colony awaiting us. The response was immediate, a unified chorus of voices, some resolute, some hesitant, yet all bound by a shared objective. The Dauntless shuddered as its antediluvian engines coughed and sputtered to life, filling the air with a deep, guttural growl. Thorne gripped the chair's armrests, his knuckles bone-white. He surveyed his fleet, the corroded hulls and patchwork plating. They were a motley, mismatched collection of vessels, but they were his, and they stood ready to fight. Prepare for departure, he commanded, his voice infused with resolve. We lift off in 1 hour. The Dauntless lurched forward, severing its bonds with the docking clamps. The other ships followed suit, their engines roaring in unified defiance. The ragtag armada, forged from desperation and powered by hope, embarked on its voyage into the unknown. As the Dauntless emerged from the dry dock, Thorne glimpsed Technician Run, stationed near the airlock of the Resolute. The young man offered a tentative wave, a nervous smile gracing his lips. Beside him, lurking in the shadows, stood Sparky Jones, a wrench clutched in his hand and a spark of inventive madness dancing in his eyes. Thorne inclined his head, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him that he had his crew. Now his only task was to steer them to victory, and perhaps, just perhaps, salvage a few lives in the process. The price of duty, he was about to pay it again, in full of Hope's last stand. Whirlwinds of dust devils cavorted across the parched landscape, miniature cyclones of ochre grit momentarily blinding Anya. The rusted skeletons of a defunct hydroponics farm clawed at the heavens, stark reminders of the Kal-El's merciless efficiency. The air reeked of metallic tang and rot, a noxious brew that rasped in her throat. She choked, tugging the frayed scarf higher to filter the polluted air. Anything. Sergei's voice, a static-laced whisper, echoed in her calm bead, mirroring her own profound weariness. Anya nudged a corroded panel with her boot, scattering a shower of rust motes and fractured metal. Just wreckage, Papa. Not a bolt worth taking. The KRYLL scoured this place months back. Press on. We desperately need those regulator valves for the water recycler. Without them, his voice dwindled, the implied doom hanging palpable in the fetid air. Anya knew the unspoken truth. Without purified water, Hope's stand faced extinction. Rationing was already severe, the reservoir shrinking daily. The KRYL blockade, silent, obsidian vessels, had choked the lifeblood from the settlement. No influx of supplies, no avenue of escape. She pressed onward, boots crunching on pulverized earth. The sun blazed, turning her scavenged envirosuit into a sweltering oven. Each step was a monumental effort, each breath a stark reminder of their dwindling lifeline, but a shard of reflected light snagged her attention. Partially submerged beneath a mountain of rubble, a stretch of intact pipe. She dropped to her knees, clawing at the debris with bare hands, oblivious to the lacerations blooming on her skin. "Papa, I think I've found something." A spark of vitality infused Sergei's tone. "What is it?" "Piping looks to be the right gauge, clearing the obstruction." She strained, finally wresting the pipe from its rocky grave, heavier than anticipated, coated in grime, yet undeniably usable. She scrubbed away the encrusted dirt. She spied a rectangular access panel affixed to the side. "Hold on." She fumbled for her multi-tool, gingerly popping open the panel. Inside, nestled within a web of wires, rested two regulator valves, pristine, unused. "Papa, I've got them. The regulator valves, they're here." The wave of relief crashing through Sergei's words was almost tangible. "Anya, you've delivered salvation. Return here. Quickly, the feeling tells me our good fortune is about to expire." His premonition proved correct. Anya hurried back towards the settlement. A deep, bestial growl reverberated across the desolate terrain. The KRYL, closing in. Hope's stand offered little visual appeal. A collection of hastily erected shelters clustered around the central reservoir, ringed by a ramshackle perimeter of salvaged metal and sputtering laser grids. A far cry from the flourishing colony of yesteryear, but nonetheless a sanctuary, a home worth defending to their last breath. Sergei stood on the elevated command platform, his face a roadmap of hardship and anxiety. He tracked Anya's progress as she sprinted toward the barricades, two KRYL drones lumbering in pursuit. Their carapaces shimmered under the harsh light, their multifaceted eyes glittering with a hunter's instinct. "Engage," he barked into the comm. The laser grids sputtered to life, bathing the landscape in a scintillating blue haze. The drones shrieked as the concentrated energy sheared through their exoskeletons, their movements faltering. Yet, they pressed their attack. Anya hurled herself behind a crumbling wall just as one of the drones unleashed a torrent of plasma fire. The barrier disintegrated in a cloud of pulverized rock, sending her sprawling. "Anya!" Sergei roared, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. She scrambled up, ears ringing, vision swimming. The drones converged. A figure materialized from the shadows, brandishing a jury-rigged energy rifle. Marcus, one of the few remaining security personnel, opened fire, expertly targeting the drone's vulnerable junctures. They stumbled, their advance slowing, yet they resisted collapse. The skirmish was desperate, lopsided. They were hopelessly outmatched, inadequately armed, but resolute in their refusal to yield. Hope's stand represented their last vestige of civilization. Sergei addressed the assembled colonists, his voice infused with somber resolve. "They return, inevitably. Their persistence will remain unwavering, until we are extinguished or subjugated. This much we understand. They covet our resources, they seek domain over our haven. They are determined to snuff out the last embers of humanity on this forsaken planetoid." He paused, allowing his words to permeate the air. He scanned the faces of those before him, men, women, children, their eyes mirroring both dread and unwavering defiance. "However, they shall not prevail. We are forged in the crucible of pioneers, explorers, survivors. We have withstood trials that would shatter lesser spirits, that we have carved a life from this desolation against impossible odds, and we shall safeguard it with every fiber of our being." A cheer resonated from the assembly, a resounding declaration that echoed across the barren expanse. Farmers, mechanics, educators, engineers, ordinary individuals transformed into guardians of their home. They were united in their singular objective, preservation. "Remember the cause for which we stand," Sergei exhorted, his voice cutting through the din. "We defend our families. We defend our autonomy. We stand for Hope's stand." He thrust his fist skyward. For Hope's stand. For Hope's stand. The colonists thundered in response. Elder Kai, his face etched with the accumulated wisdom of generations, shuffled forward, frail and stooped with age, yet his eyes burned with an unyielding conviction. My children, he began, his voice a soothing balm. We are confronted by a profound darkness, a darkness seeking to engulf us entirely. But even amidst the deepest shadows, a solitary spark of hope can ignite a conflagration that will banish the encroaching night. He gestured towards the heavens, where the KRYLL ships loomed like predatory birds circling their prey. They may have plundered our stores, they may have razed our dwellings, yet they cannot seize our spirit, they cannot extinguish our hope. For hope is not a tangible commodity susceptible to theft or destruction. It is an inextinguishable flame residing within each of us. He closed his eyes, his lips moving in silent invocation. Let us beseech guidance. Let us invoke courage. Let us supplicate for deliverance. The colonists bowed their heads, their hearts a tempest of trepidation and expectant faith. They understood the unfavorable odds. They acknowledged the potential for annihilation. Yet, they also vowed to resist with every last ounce of their strength. Anya, positioned beside her father, experienced a surge of renewed determination. She clenched her scavenged energy pistol, knuckles bone-white. She was but one individual, residing in a remote settlement, on a forgotten planet. But she was a component of something far grander. She was an embodiment of humanity, and she would not permit the KRYLL to extinguish that spark. The initial wave of KRYLL warriors plunged from the sky, their chitinous armor gleaming under the twin suns of Hope's stand. The contest for existence had begun. The battle raged with unbridled ferocity. The KRYLL swarmed over the defenses, their plasma rifles unleashing searing energy bolts. The colonists retaliated with every implement at their disposal, salvaged weaponry, improvised explosives, and unadulterated tenacity. Anya navigated the chaos, firing her pistol at anything that moved with hostile intent. She witnessed Marcus succumb, felled by a withering barrage of plasma fire. She saw a young woman, barely past adolescence, sacrifice herself to detonate a makeshift bomb, annihilating a contingent of KRYLL warriors in a fiery blast. The atmosphere was thick with the acrid tang of burning metal, ozone, and spilled blood. The ground became carpeted with the fallen, both living and dead. Yet, the colonists held their ground, unyielding in their defense. Sergei, his face masked in grime and crimson, moved from point to point, bolstering morale, directing fire, and galvanizing his comrades to escalate their efforts. He was a tempest of fury, a force of nature embodied. Anya watched as a plasma bolt struck him squarely in the chest. He staggered, clutching at the wound, yet refused to yield. He roared a challenge, firing his rifle until the magazine ran dry. "Papa!" Anya screamed, surging toward him. He waved her away. "Maintain your position. Your contribution is essential." She hesitated, torn between her duty and her familial affection. "Go," he roared, his gaze aflame. "Defend Hope's stand." Anya, tears streaming down her face, obeyed. She acknowledged the validity of his command. She had a responsibility to the remaining colonists, to the future legacy of Hope's stand. She wheeled around, plunging back into the fray with renewed resolve. She would ensure that her father's sacrifice would not be rendered futile. She would fight until her lifeblood drained from her. The sun sank below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the ravaged landscape. The KRYLL continued their assault, their legions seemingly endless. The colonists were exhausted, their fortifications crumbling under the relentless pressure. Just as hope seemed poised to vanish entirely, a faint glimmer pierced the sky. A distant, expanding point of light. Anya shielded her eyes, scanning the heavens, and then she saw them. Vessels, Earth vessels. Descending from the firmament like avenging angels. A collective gasp reverberated through the ranks of the colonists. After an eternity of isolation, salvation had arrived. The Earth vessels commenced their attack, unleashing a cataclysmic barrage of explosive shells that tore gaping holes in the KRYLL ranks. The heavens erupted in a dazzling exhibition of light and raw power. The KRYLL, caught completely off guard, faltered, their offensive ground to a halt, their warriors scattered in disarray. The colonists erupted in cheers, their voices raspy with exhaustion and jubilation. They were delivered. They were rescued. Anya, her body racked with pain, her spirit soaring, gazed skyward, tears coursing down her cheeks. They came, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They actually came. Yet, even amidst her elation, a nagging doubt lingered within her. The conflict remained unresolved. The KRYLL threat persisted, and the cost of this intervention, she intuited, would be steep. But for this moment, she permitted herself to bask in a flicker of hope, a hope that had nearly been snuffed out, now burning with renewed intensity. Whispers of weakness. Light lanced through a grimy window, illuminating dust swirling within Anya's makeshift lab. The sharp scent of singed metal and blood lingered, testament to the recent clash. Face streaked with soot, Anya leaned over the eviscerated form of a KRYLL drone, a spiderweb of wires connecting its ruined core to a cobbled-together power source. The air buzzed with unstable energy. For days, she'd toiled, driven by a pressing need to decipher their enemy. Earth's reinforcements had granted them a reprieve. But time remained their most precious and dwindling resource. The KRYLL, seemingly simple, were implacable, their attacks growing bolder, more cunning. Survival demanded more than just grit and antiquated weaponry. They needed leverage. Anything concrete. Sergei's voice, raspy with weariness, sliced through the equipment's whine. He stood framed in the doorway, a silhouette against the corridor's wavering light. His gaze, usually a source of reassurance, now reflected exhaustion. Anya remained focused. Closed on mapping their neural network, trying to grasp their coordination. It's unlike anything I've encountered. Rudimentary, almost entirely instinctual. Instinct is a force to be reckoned with. Anya, never dismiss it. Sergei entered, boots crunching on scattered components. He picked up a stray spanner, turning it in his thick fingers. A habit, Anya knew, a way to find purchase on something solid, something he could manage. I'm not. But instinct has exploitable weaknesses. There has to be a loophole, an undefended point, something. Anya tweaked a dial on the power unit. A piercing squeal filled the room, then died. Damn, Sergei sighed. Rest? Anya, you haven't slept in cycles. I'll rest when hope's stand is secure. Papa, not before. She plunged back into the tangle of wires, her concentration unwavering. Sergei watched her, a complex emotion, pride mingled with deep concern. Etched on his face, he recognized that look. Determination bordering on obsession. It was both her sharpest strength and heaviest burden. The breakthrough arrived unexpectedly the following day, not within Anya's laboratory, but in the subterranean arteries feeding Hope's stand. The mine shaft reeked of pulverized stone and damp earth. The clang of picks resonated through the narrow tunnels, a stark reminder of their precarious hold on existence. The miners, haggard and gaunt, swung their tools with grim resolve. Every fragment of ore, every drop of water, represented a small victory in their battle against oblivion. Old man Gregor, his face a tapestry of wrinkles formed by time and trial, worked a particularly resistant vein. He brought his pickaxe down with a grunt. The impact vibrated through the rock. Suddenly, the earth bucked. A low, guttural drone echoed within the tunnel, growing in intensity. Panic seized the miners. KRYLL intrusion underground was infrequent but terrifying. They scrambled for safety, hearts pounding against their ribs. The sound, however, lacked the telltale screech of a KRYL. It was deeper, more resonant, a vibration that resonated in their very bones. Gregor, hands clapped over his ears, stumbled backward as his pick struck the rock face. The contact sparked a high-pitched whine from the point of impact. The droning intensified, then abruptly ceased. Silence fell like a shroud. Gregor, dazed but unscathed, stared at the exposed rock. He raised his pick, testing the seam again. The whine returned, louder this time. The ground trembled, and then, from the earth's core, erupted a sound unlike any they'd known. A frantic chorus of high-pitched ululations that abruptly faded into the void. News of the incident reached Anya swiftly. She arrived at the shaft, her features set into a rigid mask of intensity. Gregor, still, visibly rattled, recounted the events, his voice trembling with a mix of dread and wonder. Anya scrutinized the rock, tracing its rough surface. She signaled for a miner to retrieve a sonic scanner, a relic from before the collapse, used for geological surveying. Calibrating the device, she aimed it at the rock. The scanner chirped, displaying a complex waveform. "What is it, Anya?" Sergei asked, his voice tight with apprehension. Anya stared at the readout, her eyes widening. Resonance. The stone vibrates at a specific frequency point one that appears to disorient the KRYLL. She ordered the miners to evacuate, then set up a portable amplifier. Linking it to the scanner, she slowly amplified the frequency. The air crackled. The ground began to shudder. A low groan permeated the mine. Then, a series of agitated screeches. Anya pushed the setting higher. The screeches escalated, becoming a deafening discord. A KRLL drone erupted from the tunnel's mouth, its carapace shimmering, its mandibles clicking erratically. But something was amiss. Disoriented, its movements spasmodic. It staggered forward, then abruptly collapsed, limbs twitching in its death throes. Anya killed the power. Silence returned. Cautiously, she nudged the prone drone with her boot, lifeless. "Papa," she breathed, her voice a bare whisper. "I think we've stumbled upon their Achilles heel." Back in her workshop, Anya toiled relentlessly, deciphering the sonic signature. She correlated it with her data on the KRYLL drone's brain, seeking a correlation. Hours bled into a blur of purpose. Sergei watched, his anxiety increasing with each passing moment. Finally, as the dawn painted the sky with its first tentative light, Anya straightened, her face illuminated by the console's glow. "I have it," she announced, her voice hoarse yet triumphant. The KRLL's communication relies on low-frequency vibrations. It's how they coordinate, maintain their shared consciousness. The high-frequency resonance disrupts that entirely. It scrambles their signals, throws them into confusion, ultimately kills them. "Certain of this?" Sergei asked, hope laced with caution. "As much as I can be, but it's a localized effect. We must amplify it, project it, make it a weapon." Sergei ran a hand through thinning hair. "How? We lack the resources for anything like that." Anya pivoted to face him, her eyes burning with resolve. "We improvise. We adapt. We will find a way. We must." She paused, her gaze hardening. "The coalition might have abandoned us, Papa, but we haven't abandoned ourselves. We refuse to simply await our demise." She approached a map of Hope's stand, its boundaries meticulously charted on a worn canvas. She traced the perimeter with her finger, her expression pensive. "The KRYLL are drawn to our energy signature, our heat. They are, in a sense, predictable. We can use this against them." Turning back to Sergei, her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "We'll lure them in, concentrate their forces into a kill zone, then unleash the resonance. We will not only defend Hope's stand, Papa, we will strike back." Sergei stared, his face a study in conflicting emotions. He saw the fire in her eyes, the unwavering spirit. He knew arguing was futile. Anya had made her decision. "What do you require?" he asked, his voice resigned but firm. A rare smile touched Anya's lips. "I need everyone. Every miner, every farmer, every person capable in Hope's stand. We are going to forge a weapon, Papa. A weapon that will make the KRYLL rue the day they encroached on our world." She began to sketch out her strategy, her words gaining confidence. She spoke of modifying mining gear, constructing sonic emitters, devising traps and ambushes. Sergei listened carefully, his mind racing, weighing risks, calculating chances. It was a desperate gambit, a long shot. But it was action, and confronting overwhelming odds, a path, however improbable, was all they possessed. Anya outlined the plans. Sergei's gaze drifted towards the window. The dawning sun was climbing above the horizon, painting the stark landscape with long shadows. He thought of Elder Kai, his quiet faith, his enduring belief in humanity's tenacity. He thought of the colonists, their faces etched with hardship, their spirits undefeated. He knew what they were considering was perilous, perhaps even fatal, but they had no alternative. They were the castaways, the forgotten, but they were far from broken. He turned back to Anya, his eyes filled with a new intensity. "Very well," he affirmed, his voice unwavering. "Let's craft a weapon." Anya nodded, her smile broadening. For the first time in a long time, she felt a spark of optimism. It was tenuous, like a flicker of flame against the darkness, but it was hope nonetheless. And within the desperate struggle for survival, it was their most potent weapon. They would drive the KRYLL back into the black void from where they emerged, and the name Hope's stand would forever be written in the archives of those who overcame the odds, even if there was no one left to write the narrative into the void. The abyss claimed them without ceremony. 1 heartbeat, they clung to the coalition outpost's frigid reality. The next, an incandescent white devoured all. Then, the viewport became a canvas of kaleidoscopic hues, stretching and contorting space, bathing the bridge crew in an otherworldly luminescence. Hyperspace, Thorn's grip tightened on the command chair, his knuckles bone-white, though countless jumps etched his memory. A primal disquiet still clawed at him that IT was akin to being atomized and reassembled in a realm where natural laws were mere suggestions. He glanced at Viper, her countenance an impassive mask of composure, though a spark of exhilaration danced in her eyes. She thrived on the precipice, where impossibilities dissolved. That he craved that vibrancy now. Status, he snapped, his voice slicing through the engine's resonant thrum. All vessels accounted for, General, Viper reported, her tone sharp and precise. Jump successful. Estimated time to Hope's stand. 48 hours. Standard. No immediate threats detected. Good. Maintain full vigilance. Commander, I want constant sweeps. No unwelcome surprises awaiting us at dropout. Viper nodded, her attention riveted on the swirling pandemonium beyond the viewport. Acknowledged, General. He pushed himself from his chair, his joints creaking in protest after hours of taut anticipation. Their fleet, a motley assortment of retrofitted freighters and mothballed cruisers, inspired little confidence. Yet, it was theirs. His responsibility. He activated the comm. Attention, all personnel. His voice resonated through the ship's intercom. This is General Thorn. As you are aware, we are inbound to Hope's stand, a colony the Coalition has deemed expendable. A low murmur rippled across the comms. He raised a hand, silencing the unrest. I am sure many of you question why we risk life and limb for a forgotten settlement. The answer is simple. They are people. They deserve a chance at survival. Turning our backs on them makes us indistinguishable from the KRYL. He paused, allowing his pronouncement to resonate. He could almost feel the weight of their scrutiny, the blend of expectation and trepidation. We are uncertain of the conditions we will find. IT may be a silent graveyard. IT may be a battlefield. But I vow this. We will fight. We will defend those colonists with every fiber of our being. We will demonstrate to the Coalition and to the KRYL the true meaning of humanity. That we will display the strength of unity. Are you with me? An eruption of voices flooded the comms, a chorus of renewed resolve. Yes, sir. For Hope's stand. Let's frag some KRYL. A genuine smile illuminated Thorn's face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. That he might be a renegade general, a betrayer in the Coalition's estimation, but he was not alone. That he commanded a crew devoted to something grander than themselves. That was all that mattered. That is the spirit I hoped to hear, he affirmed, his tone ringing with resolve. Now, let us prepare for battle. He deactivated the comm and returned to the bridge, his steps lighter than before. Viper met his gaze, a flicker of admiration evident in her expression. Well spoken, General, she remarked. They needed that resolve. So did I, Thorn conceded. Keeps the specters of doubt at bay. The ensuing hours dissolved into a monotonous grind. The perpetual drone of the engines, the unceasing monitoring of sensors, the infinite canvas of hyperspace. Thorn dedicated his time to reviewing tactical blueprints, dissecting KRYL attack patterns, and attempting to devise a strategy for a situation veiled in ignorance. That Hope's stand was a locked box, an information desert. He was navigating blindly. He visited the mess hall, forcing down a flavorless nutrient paste that resembled cardboard. That he patrolled the engineering section, offering words of encouragement to the grease-smeared technicians, toiling relentlessly to maintain the aging vessels. He even joined a card game with a group of anxious Marines, deliberately losing a few hands to buoy their spirits. Anything to suppress the mounting fear. Anything to restrain his own encroaching misgivings. Then, the alarm shattered the fragile calm. That a high-pitched, insistent wail tore through the ship, scattering the illusion of peace. Report, Thorn bellowed, rushing back to the bridge. Unidentified object, dead ahead, Viper announced, her fingers flying across the console. Too massive to be debris, it's a derelict vessel. On an intercept course. Thorne's gaze fixed on the holographic projection, his blood turning to ice. The colossal hulk of mangled metal and extinguished lights filled the screen, its silhouette expanding exponentially. They were traveling too rapidly, navigating hyperspace, to execute any significant deviation. Evasive maneuvers. Thorne barked. All ships, brace for impact. Viper shook her head. Too late, General. We can't alter course swiftly enough. Collision imminent. Panic threatened to engulf Thorne that he had shepherded these individuals here. He could not permit them to perish due to his rash judgment. Jax, report to the bridge. Immediately, he thundered into the comms. Moments later, the lean frame of Jax, the fleet's renowned ace pilot, strolled onto the bridge, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. What's the commotion, General? He drawled. You interrupted my beauty rest. We are on a collision course with a derelict vessel. Thorne snapped, gesturing toward the holographic display. Can you avert disaster? Jax whistled softly, his eyes widening as he assessed the scale of the approaching behemoth. That's a hefty one. Hyperspace fender bender. Huh. Unpleasant prospect. He tapped his chin, pretending to contemplate. Well, normally I'd declare us scrap metal. But a flash of genuine enthusiasm ignited in his eyes. Where's the sport in that? He sauntered to the pilot's chair, displacing the startled officer. All right, tighten your belts, folks. This is about to get interesting. Thorne watched, his heart hammering against his ribs, as Jax initiated a cascade of commands, his fingers dancing across the controls with impossible dexterity. The ship shuddered violently as Jax implemented a string of intricate maneuvers, pushing the engines beyond their capacity. Sirens blared, red lights pulsed, and the crew braced for the inevitable impact. What in the hell are you doing, Jax? Viper yelled over the cacophony. You'll tear the ship apart. Relax, sweetheart, Jax replied, his voice remarkably composed amidst the pandemonium. Just a touch of skillful flying. Have faith. The derelict swelled in the viewport, an impending doom. It would be a close call. Too close to in a final, desperate gamble. Jax executed a breathtaking maneuver, a fusion of a hairpin turn, a surge of power, and a gravity assist that seemed to defy the very fabric of reality. The vessel bucked violently, catapulting the crew against the bulkheads, but then it succeeded. They grazed past the derelict, missing it by what seemed like the width of a hair. The ship groaned, shuddered, and then, miraculously, regained equilibrium. A collective sigh of relief washed over the bridge. Thorne stared at the viewport, his mind struggling to reconcile the impossible feat he had just witnessed. Report, he managed to rasp. We're clear, Viper exclaimed, her voice laced with incredulity. We actually pulled it off. Thorne turned to Jax, who was reclining in his chair, a smug grin plastered across his face. You magnificent madman, Thorne said, shaking his head in disbelief. You actually did it. Told ya, Jax said with a shrug. Just a dash of fancy flying. Now, about that commendation I was promised. Thorne chuckled, the tension finally receding from his body. You will get your commendation, Jax, that you've earned it. But perhaps, next time, try to avoid nearly sending us all to an early grave. Agreed. No commitments, General, Jax retorted, winking. Where's the thrill in that? The incident had shaken them to their core, yet it had also served as a reminder of their resilience, their capability to triumph over seemingly insurmountable odds. They were distant from hope's stand, facing a phantom adversary in a hostile galaxy. But they had each other, and they had Jax, the outlandish pilot capable of conjuring miracles. Even in the heart of hyperspace, they persevered on their venture into the void. Thorne could not suppress a nascent feeling of optimism. Perhaps, perhaps, they stood a fighting chance. First blood. The klaxon's howl sliced through the Hopebringer's bridge, shattering the brittle silence. Thorne jolted, his hand reflexively going for the comm situation report. Sir, contacts inbound. A voice, tight with anxiety, crackled in response. Multiple bogies, closing fast. KRYLL patrol group identified, 6 fighters, 1 heavy cruiser. 6 fighters and a cruiser. An abrasive welcome. A hard knot of resolve settled in Thorne's gut that they'd arrived. Addressing the bridge, his tone remained steady despite the spike of adrenaline. All stations, battle alert. Viper, lead the charge. Eris, I need a complete tactical breakdown on that cruiser, vulnerabilities, firing sequences, anything you can offer. The main view screen shimmered to life, displaying nascent glimmers that solidified into the unmistakable profiles of KRYLL fighters. Keen, predatory shapes that exuded menace. Looming behind them was the cruiser, a colossal brute of scorched metal and serrated edges, bristling with gun batteries. They know we're here, Viper's voice, edged with anticipation, cut through the quiet tension. Let's give them a show, engaging. The Hopebringer surged forward, its engine screaming a defiant challenge as it accelerated to meet the KRYLL patrol. Thorn's makeshift fleet spread out, forming a bulwark around the flagship. Emerald lances of KRYLL plasma stabbed into the void, answered by the Coalition's brilliant blue-white energy bursts. The initial exchange was a maelstrom of destruction. The KRYLL's firepower was intense, their plasma ripping through shields like paper. A smaller freighter, the Dauntless, suffered a direct hit, its hull blossoming into an inferno as it spiraled helplessly away. Damage assessment. Thorn barked. Hull breach on deck 4. Fire spreading unchecked, came the grim reply. Casualty reports climbing. Thorn's fist clenched, frustration burning in his throat that he watched Viper, her fighter a silver dart, thread through the deadly rain, defying gravity with impossible maneuvers. Viper's status? Just having a bit of fun, General, she answered, her voice tight with exhilaration. These KRYLL boys are quick, but they've never seen anything like this. On the Hopebringer's bridge, Eris, hunched over his console, hammered at the keyboard. General, I've got something, he announced, excitement coloring his voice. The KRYLL cruiser, its energy signature is anomalous. It appears to be running on a heavily modified energy core, immense power, but inherently unstable. And I believe I've located a weakness. A conduit near the main reactor, poorly shielded. A concentrated energy burst could overload it. Can you pinpoint it precisely? Thorn demanded, his gaze fixed on the evolving combat. Locking on a confirmed, relaying coordinates to Viper. Viper, you copy? Thorn prompted. Loud and clear, General, she confirmed. Time for a close encounter. Viper broke formation, her fighter hurtling towards the KRYLL cruiser like a driven needle. The cruiser's gunners unleashed a storm of plasma, but she pirouetted through the withering fire, executing daring maneuvers that defied physics. She's a maniac, Thorn muttered, a mix of admiration and apprehension in his tone. An effective one, Eris added, eyes glued to his console's readouts. As Viper closed in on the cruiser, she fired a barrage of missiles, forcing the gunners to target the incoming ordnance. Then, in a final, blinding dash, she positioned her fighter directly before the identified conduit. Firing now, she yelled. A concentrated beam of energy speared from her fighter, striking the cruiser's hull with deadly precision. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then, a cataclysmic flash erupted from the cruiser's core, followed by a series of devastating explosions that convulsed the ship's frame. The KRYLL cruiser, once an intimidating symbol of power, became a flaming derelict, drifting listlessly through space. The surviving KRYLL fighters, briefly stunned by the loss of their flagship, scattered and fled. They're retreating, someone cried out on the bridge. Don't let them escape, Thorn commanded. Pursue and eliminate. The Coalition ships lunged forward, weapons blazing, preying on the fleeing KRYLL fighters. The battle was far from won, but the momentum had shifted. Humanity had struck a decisive blow. As the last of the KRYLL fighters succumbed, a cheer rippled through the Hopebringer's bridge. Thorn allowed himself a fleeting smile, but his expression quickly grew somber. This was only the opening salvo. The KRYLL now knew their location. The true conflict was only just beginning. He pivoted to Eris. What else did you discern from those KRYLL tactics? Eris looked up, his face illuminated by scientific curiosity. They're remarkably adaptive, General. Their firing patterns evolved continuously throughout the engagement, almost as if they were learning our reactions in real time. Learning? Thorn frowned. That's concerning. Furthermore, Eris continued, their energy weapons, they're more efficient than anything we've encountered. They're managing to generate significantly greater firepower with reduced energy consumption. So, they're evolving, Thorne stated grimly. Adapting, just as we are. We can't underestimate them. This will not be simple. He turned to the comms officer. Signal all ships. Evaluate damage, attend to the wounded, and prepare for further engagements. We have a long journey ahead before we reach Hope's Stand, and I doubt the KRYLL will allow us safe passage. The atmosphere on the bridge transmuted from elation to grim resolve. The victory had been hard-won and had come at a price. The Dauntless was lost, and other ships had suffered substantial damage. But they had survived and had demonstrated that even facing insurmountable odds, humanity could still retaliate. Thorne moved to the main view screen, gazing out at the immense void of space. The wreckage of the KRYLL cruiser floated silently, a stark testament to the recent battle. He thought of Anya, of the colonists on Hope's Stand, clinging to their hope in the face of obliteration. We're coming, he murmured. We're coming, and we will not fail you. On the bridge of the Hopebringer, Commander Zara Viper Khan leaned back in her command chair, a satisfied smirk dancing on her lips. The lingering adrenaline still coursed through her, and the excitement of the battle still clung to the air. She had flown countless missions against the KRYLL, but this one felt distinct. This one felt significant. She glanced at Thorne, who remained at the view screen, his gaze fixed on the starlit expanse. She respected him, admired his courage and unwavering dedication to his ideals. But she also sensed that he was burdened, seemingly carrying the weight of the galaxy. Viper rose and approached him, halting a few feet away. General, she said, her voice hushed. That was quite a display. Thorne turned to face her, a weary smile tugging at his lips. We did what was necessary, Commander. We demonstrated that we will not yield. We did more than that, General, Viper countered. We demonstrated that we are unafraid, and that is something they will remember. She paused and then added, You know, I have flown with you for a long time, General. I've witnessed you make difficult calls, but this is the boldest move I've ever seen you make. Thorne chuckled. Bold, or simply reckless? I am not sure myself. Maybe a bit of both, Viper said with a wink. But either way, it's inspiring that you've given these people something to believe in, General, something to fight for. Thorne sighed. I merely hope it is enough, Zara. I hope it is enough to make a difference. It will be, General, Viper said, her voice ringing with conviction. It has to be. She clapped him on the shoulder, then returned to her station. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And as they ventured deeper into KRYLL territory, they knew they would confront even greater obstacles. But they were prepared. They were armed with courage, resolve, and a shared faith in the sanctity of human life. And that, they understood, was a weapon even the KRYLL could not overcome. From his station, Eris watched the interaction, scribbling rapidly into his datapad. The KRYLL's adaptability was troubling, but so was the Coalition Force's quick shift in mindset. The crew of the Hopebringer was quickly adapting to the KRYLL. Each encounter with the KRYLL was proving to be a deadly dance, a macabre waltz of adaptation and obliteration. The grim beauty of it all fascinated him, the race against time. The cheers had barely died on the Hopebringer's decks when the klaxons erupted anew, a shriller, more demanding shriek this time. That Viper's voice, tight with incredulity, cut through the comms. General, I'm detecting a massive energy spike, warp signature, directly ahead. A cold dread coiled in Thorne's gut. He moved swiftly to the bridge, the residual buzz from the previous skirmish still thrumming in his veins. The hollow display flickered, solidifying into a grim tableau, a crimson cloud, dwarfing the shattered remains of the patrol, spewing forth from a roiling vortex of raw power. KRYLL reinforcements, and plenty of them. Situation report, Thorne clipped out, masking the fear that threatened to surface. Dozens of cruisers, General, Viper rattled off, fingers, flying across the console. And capital-class vessels, at least 3 identified so far. Their vector is Hope's Stand. Thorne cursed silently. He'd prayed for breathing room, a chance to patch the ship, replenish supplies, and see to the wounded. But the KRYLL were unyielding. They'd grant no quarter. He turned, his face a mask of resolve, to Eris. Time to impact on the colony. Eris studied his readings. At current velocity, General, under 12 hours. 12 hours. Anya and the colonists wouldn't survive an onslaught of that magnitude. That Hope's stand would become another charred monument to KRYLL aggression. The memory of Anya, her gaze resolute as she scanned the heavens, burned in his mind. He couldn't allow it. Helmsman, plot an intercept course. Immediate. Thorne commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maximum warp. A ripple of astonishment washed over the bridge crew. General, with respect, Viper protested. We're combat damaged. Shields are compromised. Ammunition is critically low. Challenging that fleet would be a death sentence. Perhaps, Thorne conceded, his eyes fixed on the encroaching KRYLL armada. But we can't let them reach Hope's stand. We are the shield. That we buy them time. That's the only currency we have left. He saw apprehension in Viper's eyes, the stark terror reflecting on the faces of his crew. But beneath the fear, a different glint sparked. Defiance. Exhausted, battered, and horribly outnumbered, they wouldn't yield. They had witnessed the KRLL's brutality firsthand, and they wouldn't let it prevail. Initiate emergency warp sequence, Thorne ordered. And establish a channel to Hope's stand. I need to speak with Anya. On Hope's stand, a heavy atmosphere of foreboding had settled. The fleeting elation from their earlier victory had soured, replaced by gnawing anxiety. The comms clicked, then cleared, and Thorne's voice, weary but resolute, filled the command center. Anya, Thorne here. We're inbound, but the KRYLL are deploying reinforcements. ETA less than 12 hours. Anya's face whitened slightly, yet her voice held firm. Understood, General. That will hold them off as long as possible. I know you will, Thorne replied, a note of pride coloring his words. But be realistic. You're outmatched, outgunned. Focus on a tight perimeter, ration your supplies, and hold for us. We're coming. The comms went dead. Anya pivoted to face her father, Sergei, her expression grave. 12 hours, can we do it? Sergei, his features etched with worry, ran a hand through his thinning hair. 12 hours against a KRYLL fleet. It will take a miracle. He paused, his gaze hardening into steely determination. But we owe it to everyone here. We owe it to your mother's memory. He surveyed the command center, a cramped, dimly lit space now the epicenter of their desperate defense. Maps, hastily drawn tactical diagrams, and notes covered the walls. The air buzzed with the feverish activity of colonists preparing for the unavoidable onslaught. Priorities, Sergei stated, his tone regaining its familiar authority. Reinforce the defenses, double the patrols, and bring those improvised turrets online. Every second counts. Anya nodded, her mind already racing to the task. The mining tunnels? We could collapse sections, create kill zones. Too risky, Sergei countered. The tunnel's structural integrity is uncertain. A collapse could bury people alive. Then we weaponize them. Anya said, a flicker of inspiration lighting her eyes. Lure them into the tunnels, detonate the explosives we've been stockpiling. Sergei pondered the proposal, his brow furrowed in thought. Dangerous, but it might be our best shot at slowing them down. Fine, prepare the tunnels, but proceed with extreme caution. One misstep could cost us everything. As Anya turned to issue commands, Elder Kai approached, his expression placid despite the looming threat. Daughter, may I have a word? Anya turned, surprised. Of course, Elder. Kai guided her to a quiet corner, away from the frenetic activity. He clasped her hand, his grip surprisingly firm. I have witnessed much in my long life, Anya. I have seen shadows, and I have seen light. And I tell you now, even amidst this encroaching darkness, hope persists. Anya offered a weak smile. Thank you, Elder, your faith gives us strength. Faith alone is insufficient, child, Kai countered, a twinkle in his eye. You must also possess courage, and that, Anya Petrova, you possess in abundance. Remember that, when the hour arrives. Remember the reason for your fight. He squeezed her hand and departed, his frail frame displaying surprising agility. Anya watched him go, his words resonating within her. She couldn't predict their survival, but she vowed to fight until the bitter end. She owed it to her people, her father, her mother's memory, and the belief that Thorne and his crew would arrive in time. Far removed from Hope's stand, within the cold, antiseptic heart of a KRYLL Nexus ship, a colossal figure observed the unfolding events on a panoramic holo. Display. Nexus Predator Row, 9. A being of pure intellect and unyielding ruthlessness, watched the KRYLL fleet's relentless advance upon the vulnerable colony. The destruction of a scouting party was inconsequential, a mere irritation. The humans were proving more tenacious than projected, but their efforts were futile. Increase the primary fleet's velocity, Rho. 9 dictated, its voice a synthesized drone. Deploy supplemental berserker units. The annihilation of Hope's stand must be swift and absolute. Their sustained existence is inefficient. A subservient KRYLL drone, its bioluminescent eyes gleaming with obedience, responded with a series of clicks and whirs. The command was transmitted, and the KRYLL armada surged forward, its crimson hulls gleaming like instruments of doom amidst the void. The Nexus held no sentiment for failure, no patience for defiance. Its singular purpose was the expansion of KRYLL dominion, and any obstacle would be shattered without compunction. Aboard the Hopebringer, Thorn stood on the bridge, his grip on the railing so tight his knuckles shone white. The ship bucked as it pushed against the limits of warp speed. The stars outside became streaks of pure light, a disorienting spectacle mirroring the turmoil in his mind. He understood the odds were astronomical. He knew they were heading into a battle that could swallow them whole. Yet, he couldn't stand idly by while Hope's stand was consumed. He'd given those people his word, promised them protection, and he would honor that vow, even at the ultimate cost. He glanced at his crew, their faces reflecting a mix of weariness and fierce determination. They were a disparate band, hailing from the fringes of the galaxy, bound by a common ideal. They placed their faith in him, and he couldn't betray that trust. Prepare for engagement, Thorn announced, his voice infused with renewed conviction. We're going to give those KRYLL scum a taste of hell they won't soon forget. The Hopebringer hurtled forward, a solitary beacon of defiance against an encroaching tide of darkness. The race against time had commenced. The fate of Hope's stand, and perhaps more, rested upon their shoulders. Asteroid graveyard. The Hopebringer groaned, a tortured metallic shriek echoing as it plunged into the asteroid field's chaotic dance. Thorn's grip on the command chair arms tightened, his knuckles bone-white. Asteroids, from mere specks to sizable chunks of rock, pirouetted around them in a deadly ballet choreographed by unseen gravities. Each a potential catacomb, a blind corner lurking with KRYLL. Status, Thorn bit out, his voice a taut wire. Proximity alarms are in overdrive, General, Viper Khan reported from her station. Her usual smirk was absent, replaced by a hard line. KRYLL signatures off the charts that they're cloaking behind the rocks, precisely as anticipated. The view screen displayed a dizzying swirl of ice and stone, illuminated by the frigid starlight. Fleeting, predatory silhouettes zipped between the asteroids. KRYLL swarmas, their carapaces gleaming with menace. The Hopebringer's automated defenses roared to life, unleashing incandescent bursts that vaporized smaller rocks and immolated the attacking KRYLL. Maintain formation, Thorn commanded, his gaze locked on the tactical display. Viper, watch our flanks. Rodriguez, prioritize those KRYLL nests closest to the convoy. I want them gone. Acknowledged, sir. Rodriguez's reply was a calm resonance from her station. Even in this pandemonium, her poise was a bulwark. The asteroid field had become a lethal maze. KRYLL fighters, sleek and rapacious, materialized from behind larger asteroids, spitting volleys of superheated plasma. Coalition ships answered in kind, their cannons booming defiance. Yet the KRYLL's sheer numbers threatened to overwhelm them. Explosions blossomed across the void, momentarily transforming the darkness into a canvas of violent color. We're taking a hammering. A voice blared over the comms from the Dauntless, an aging escort cruiser. Shields failing. Thorn's jaw clenched. The Dauntless, an old warhorse, already bore the scars of previous battles. Evasive maneuvers, Dauntless, Khan, lay down covering fire. Viper reacted instantly. On it, General. She directed the Hopebringer's gun crews, unleashing a concentrated inferno upon the KRYLL fighters harassing the Dauntless. The KRYLL, a relentless tide, pressed onward. Rodriguez, in contrast, was an understated hunter. From her perch on the bridge, she painted KRYLL nests with her advanced targeting array. Each nest, a repulsive amalgamation of flesh and technology, throbbed with dark energy, birthing more KRYLL fighters. She chose her targets with ruthless calculation, compensating for the Erratic asteroid movements and the battlefield's turbulent energies. Ping. An invisible bolt of energy streaked from her weapon. A heartbeat later, a KRYLL nest on a far-off asteroid detonated in a pyrotechnic display. Ping. Ping. Two more nests followed suit, their annihilation carving brief sanctuaries for the hard-pressed coalition vessels. Clean shot, Rodriguez. Viper complimented, a flicker of respect in her tone. You're making these bugs regret hatching. Simply fulfilling my duty, Commander, Rodriguez responded, her voice devoid of inflection. Despite her efforts, the KRYLL tide persisted, driven by a singular, chilling purpose: the annihilation of anything in their path. The asteroid field provided ideal concealment, allowing them to launch ambushes from unpredictable vectors. The Dauntless continued to absorb punishment. Its shields sputtered and vanished, its hull groaning under the relentless assault. We've lost engine power, the Dauntless' captain cried out, his voice tinged with raw panic. We're adrift. Thorn cursed silently. The Dauntless was now a defenseless target, ripe for destruction. Immediate action was paramount. Khan, divert power to the Dauntless' backup shields. Thorn barked. Rodriguez, can you thin out those KRYLL fighters targeting them? Diverting power now, Viper confirmed. But it'll leave us exposed. We have no alternative, Thorn stated grimly. Rodriguez. Acquiring targets, Rodriguez replied. She focused on the KRYLL fighters swarming the Dauntless, her fingers dancing across the targeting console point one by one. The KRYLL fighters winked out of existence, their fragments tumbling through the abyss. The Dauntless' emergency shields flickered into being, granting a temporary reprieve from the KRYLL onslaught. But it was a fleeting sanctuary. Suddenly, an ear-splitting klaxon reverberated throughout the Hopebringer. We've been hit. Viper screamed. Direct hit to port. Shields are failing. The Hopebringer bucked violently, unseating Thorn. He crashed to the deck, his skull connecting with the console's edge. A supernova of pain bloomed behind his eyes. Damage report, he roared, scrambling to his feet. Hull breach on Deck 4. A voice reported. Life support is failing in that sector. Adrenaline surged through Thorn's veins. Deck 4 housed the Hopebringer's infirmary and crew quarters. Suffocation was imminent for those trapped within. Seal off Deck 4, Thorn commanded. Get a repair team down there, now. The Hopebringer endured a brutal pummeling. The KRYLL onslaught intensified, their attacks exhibiting increased coordination. Clearly, they aimed to cripple the flagship, to shatter the coalition's spirit. General, we can't sustain this. Viper shouted, her voice cracking. We're hemorrhaging ships. We need to disengage. Thorn hesitated, the truth of Viper's words undeniable. Losses were mounting. Yet, abandoning the Dauntless was unthinkable, not while a glimmer of hope remained, and the Hope Stand colonists weighed heavily on his mind. We're not abandoning anyone, Thorn declared, his voice a steel blade. We hold the line. Khan, reroute all available power to forward shields. Rodriguez, carve an escape path for the Dauntless. Prioritize large KRYLL clusters. Viper regarded him, concern etched on her face. General, that's suicide. Perhaps, Thorn conceded. But it's our only play. Rodriguez offered no words. A silent nod was her sole response, her motions precise and lethal as she targeted the KRYLL fighters closest to the Dauntless. Crafting a corridor of tenuous safety, the Hopebringer surged forward, its forward shields absorbing the brunt of the KRYLL assault. The symphony of groans and shudders emanated from the ship, its metallic skeleton protesting the strain, yet it persevered. Rodriguez continued to excise KRYLL fighters with unerring accuracy. The Dauntless, its engines still crippled, began its sluggish drift along Rodriguez's charted course. We're moving, the Dauntless' captain reported, his voice thick with relief. Heading towards the field's edge. Thorn watched the Dauntless on the monitor, his heart hammering against his ribs. They were within reach. Suddenly, a colossal KRYLL dreadnought emerged from behind a massive asteroid, its cannons blazing with ominous light that IT was bearing down on the Dauntless. General, we have a problem, Viper yelled. KRYLL dreadnought closing fast. Thorn swore. The dreadnought was a juggernaut, impervious to their standard weaponry. The Dauntless would be annihilated. Rodriguez, can you hit it? Thorn asked, his voice laced with desperation. Too distant, General, Rodriguez responded. Shields too strong for penetration. Despair threatened to engulf Thorn that they'd come so far, only to be denied. Then, inspiration struck at a desperate, audacious gamble. Khan, prepare for a full-speed ramming maneuver. Thorn ordered. Viper stared, incredulous. General, you cannot be serious. We'll be obliterated. Deadly serious, Thorn affirmed. We'll neutralize that dreadnought, or die trying. He could almost hear Elder Kai's voice echoing. Recalling his inner strength, he gripped the arms of the command chair, his gaze riveted on the KRYLL dreadnought. Prepare for impact, he roared. For Hope's stand. The Hopebringer accelerated, its engines shrieking in agony. The gap narrowed with terrifying speed. Adrenaline flooded Thorn's system, a cocktail of dread and exhilaration. This was the ENDTS the Hopebringer hurtled toward the KRYLL dreadnought. Thorn closed his eyes, preparing for annihilation. Beside him, Viper Khan steeled herself, a defiant smile gracing her lips. But Rodriguez remained a picture of serene focus. Her gaze locked on the target, in the final split second. She fired a single shot. Asterisk ping, asterisk. The projectile struck the KRYLL dreadnought at a vulnerable point. A fissure in its defenses Rodriguez had identified in the blink of an eye. The dreadnought's shields flickered, then collapsed, leaving it exposed. The Hopebringer slammed into the KRYLL dreadnought, the impact resonating with a monstrous crash. The ship shuddered, throwing everyone off their feet. The Hopebringer's forward section crumpled, but the dreadnought absorbed even more devastating damage. Its armor fractured and split. Internal explosions ripping through its core, crippled and ablaze. The KRYLL dreadnought drifted aimlessly through the asteroid field. Exploiting the pandemonium, the Dauntless limped toward the periphery, finally escaping the KRLL's clutches. The Hopebringer, crippled yet functional, drifted amidst the detritus, its crew shaken but alive. They had navigated the asteroid graveyard. They had rescued the Dauntless, and they had struck a significant blow against the KRYLL. Yet victory exacted a heavy toll. Ships had fallen, sacrifices had been made, and the war was far from decided. Sonic revolution. The air in the mining complex was a cloying blend of coolant's metallic spice and the sharp sting of welding gases. Anya swiped at a trickle of sweat, smearing grime across her brow. Repurposed sonic emitters, kludged together from ore processing machinery, resembled less armaments and more monstrous assemblages of steel and cable. Yet, these ungainly constructs represented Hope's sole prospect for deliverance. Resonator 3's readings are still erratic, Kai, she reported, her voice tight against the din of hammering and power tool whines. Elder Kai, the worry lines on his leathery face deepening visibly, wrestled with a wrench on a hefty capacitor bank. Diverting power from the auxiliary grid, Anya, should stabilize the flux. Eventually. Eventually might as well be never, Anya muttered, her gaze nervously drawn skyward. The KRYLL hadn't launched a full-scale assault since Thorn's daring sortie, but the firmament pressed down heavier each cycle. She could sense their nearness. A prickling dread that coiled in her gut. An attack was imminent. The question was merely of timing. Private Ito rushed over, his complexion flushed. Petrova, compromised. Section 4. Main conduit severed. Looks intentional. Anya's jaw hardened. Sabotage. It had been only a matter of time. The KRYLL's tendrils of influence wormed insidiously into every crevice of the colony. Quarantine the sector. Find the perpetrator, now. Ito nodded curtly and bolted, his boots clanging against the deck plating. Turning back to Kai, Anya's expression was a mask of resolve. How much longer until the emitters are fully online? Kai released a sigh that carried the weight of the world, his shoulders sagging. Given the extent of the damage, at least 4, possibly 5 hours, and that's barring further setbacks. 4 hours, an eternity when measured against the razor's edge of survival. Anya's gaze flicked between the incomplete emitters and the gaunt, drawn faces of the colonists toiling beside her. That span might well decide their fate. She needed more time, bought by any means necessary. All right, she announced, her voice hardening with determination. Everyone, listen up, we're accelerating the timeline. Kai, Focus entirely on Resonator 3. All remaining personnel, fortify the external defenses, double sentries. I want watchful eyes on every shadow, every conduit. Seal the perimeter. A low murmur of assent rippled through the workers, weary but unbroken. A wave of fierce pride swept over Anya, an intense protective instinct for these forgotten, striving souls. They were everything. Moving with decisive purpose, she offered guidance, nudging their effort, pushing them onward. Each shower of weld sparks, each resounding hammer blow, became an act of defiance, a refusal to yield. Yet, beneath the surface, a cold tendril of trepidation gripped her. Would it be enough? Were they truly ready for the approaching storm? Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The mess hall, normally a vibrant hive of voices and rattling trays, echoed with silence. Colonists sat huddled at the tables, their faces bearing the marks of privation, their eyes hollowed. The aroma of nutrient paste, typically an object of derision, now represented a precious lifeline, a symbol of tenuous survival. Young Alara, barely a decade old, listlessly pushed her portion around the tray, her gaze locked on the floor. Her older brother, Liam, gently urged her. Eat, Alara, conserve what you have, you'll need it. Alara shook her head, her response barely audible. I'm not hungry. Liam sighed inwardly that he knew it wasn't simple refusal. She sought to stretch their meager supply, to postpone the inevitable. That he scraped a spoonful from his own portion and offered it to her. Here, just a little. If not for you, for me. Alara looked up, her eyes filled with a heart-wrenching blend of gratitude and sorrow. She accepted the paste, her face contorting as she swallowed, a silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. Across the room, Maya, a hardened miner with hands like seasoned leather and a face to match, observed the poignant tableau. Her fist clenched, nails biting into her palm. It wasn't justice. Children shouldn't know hunger. She surged to her feet, the scraping chair drawing the attention of every soul present. All right, listen up, she boomed, her tone gravelly yet firm. We're afraid. I doubt we're hungry, true, but we're not surrendering. We will not allow these scavengers to steal our home. She paused, her gaze traversing the room. We are survivors. We've weathered horrors unimaginable. We've crawled through darkness and dust, and we will rise again. We will fight. We will safeguard our kin, and we will show those KRYLL the meaning of defiance. A hesitant ripple of applause began, growing gradually in volume and conviction. Maya's stark words struck a resonant chord, stirring the embers of determination in their weary souls. They were hungry, frightened, yet unvanquished, not by far. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Anya was examining the patched power conduit when Kai arrived, his visage clouded. There's another obstruction, Anya. What now? Anya inquired, her voice tinged with rising exasperation. The emitters, their tuning is off, way off. The frequencies are misaligned. They'll offer absolutely no defense against the KRYLL. Anya simply stared. How is that possible? We meticulously followed the schematics. Kai shrugged in helpless resignation. I couldn't begin to tell you. Someone has tampered with the inner regulators, extremely subtle rewiring, enough to shift the output. Cunning work. Sabotage, yet again. The KRYLL played a cruel game, slowly dismantling their defenses one carefully plotted step at a time. A wave of hot fury threatened to overwhelm Anya. Can it be remedied? She asked, her voice brittle. Kai ran a hand through his diminishing hair. Time will be needed, time we can't afford. Recalibrating each emitter manually, at least 3 hours, likely more. 3 hours they simply didn't possess. Anya shut her eyes, fighting to contain the rising panic. Time and options dwindled. The KRYLL were closing the noose. Her eyes snapped open, her gaze hardening. We will not have 3 hours to spare, we improvise. Turning toward a nearby technician, a young woman named Lena possessing a surprising aptitude for the intricacies of engineering, she began. Lena, a fast solution is needed, no matter the risk. Override the frequency regulators, bypass the internal safeties, and set a manual frequency override. Focus on broadcasting a wide band, something that disrupts their ability to coordinate, or even think straight. We don't need to kill them, just disorient them. Lena hesitated, her brow furrowed. That is immensely risky, Petrova. We could overload the entire matrix. I understand that, Anya stated, her voice a grim pronouncement. There is little choice. We take the risk, or be consumed. Lena nodded slowly, her stance firm. Understood that I will comply. Anya watched as Lena began her work, fingers dancing across the control interface, her face reflecting the flickering lights. It was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to salvage an untenable situation. But Anya understood one core truth about survival on Hope's stand, that sometimes the only path lay in defiance, a refusal to yield, a desperate claw toward any shard of hope in the all-consuming darkness. The air crackled with nervous energy as Lena completed the bypass. The emitters hummed, the sound growing in intensity, becoming a discordant, overwhelming cacophony. Anya felt a tremor through the floor, a subtle vibration. They were here, grabbing a nearby service rifle, its stock worn smooth from years of labor. She raised it to her shoulder, her finger hovering against the trigger guard. The fate of the colony rested upon them, the forgotten souls of Hope's stand. She looked up at the darkening heavens, the cloud cover obscuring the final light of the stars. The KRYLL were coming. And they would find no cowering prey. They would find resistance, defiance, an unquenchable spirit. Anya Petrova drew a deep breath, her heart a frantic drumbeat. The sonic emitter screamed, a roar echoing across the desolate wastes. The war for sound had begun, breaking the blockade. A tear ripped through the fabric of space, ejecting Thorn's meager fleet into hostile territory. Instantly, crimson light flooded the dauntless bridge, accompanied by a cacophony of klaxons signaling imminent peril. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a terrifying scene. "Throne preserve us," Viper Khan murmured, her usual bravado replaced by a rare awe. The KRYL blockade surpassed even the most pessimistic projections that a living constellation of obsidian ships, their chitinous hulls gleaming with a sickly bioluminescence, swarmed across the void, resembling malignant growths on the face of the cosmos. "Status report," Thorn barked, his voice a sharp counterpoint to the rising tension. "Multiple contacts, General," a young officer stammered, his fingers dancing across the console. "Initial estimates place KRYLL vessel numbers in excess of 200, sir. They're interdicting Hope's stand." 200. A chill, sharper than any vacuum, gripped Thorn's gut. The Coalition had known about this. They had knowingly delivered these people to this alien nightmare. "Evasive pattern Alpha," Viper snapped, reclaiming her iron composure as she gripped the helm. The Dauntless, a cruiser honed for combat, shuddered as she corkscrewed through the initial barrage of plasma fire. The escorting corvettes and the vulnerable transport mirrored her movements, their smaller size granting maneuverability at the cost of resilience. "We can't brawl our way through that, sir," Viper stated, her gaze darting between the tactical display and the relentless advance of the KRYL. "Not without crippling ourselves, and that transport will be vaporized in minutes." Thorn acknowledged the grim truth that a head-on assault was a death sentence. He needed salvation. Or, at the very least, a perfectly executed diversion. "Comms, patch me through to Petrova," he commanded. Code Crimson Priority. Moments later, Anya's weary face materialized on the screen. Dirt streaked her skin, yet her eyes blazed with unwavering resolve. Behind her, the colony's emergency lights pulsed, casting long shadows over colonists manning hastily erected barricades. "General Thorn," Anya greeted, her voice strained but steady. "You made it." "We're here, Anya," Thorn responded, injecting forced confidence into his tone. "But we're facing substantial resistance. We require you to draw some of those scavengers away from the settlement." Anya gave a curt nod. "We're ready. We've got a little parting gift prepared for them." Thorn's brow arched. "Parting gift? You'll see," Anya replied, a ghost of a smile gracing her lips. "Just stand by." Thorn severed the connection and turned to Viper. "Prepare for a surprise. Petrova's about to poke the bear." A suffocating quiet descended upon the bridge. The Dauntless continued its intricate dance of evasion, shields shimmering under the relentless energy bombardment. Thorn felt the tremors resonating through the ship's skeletal structure, a constant reminder of their precarious predicament. Then, it commenced. From Hope's stand's surface, concentrated sapphire beams pierced the inky blackness. The colony's repurposed sonic array, now weaponized and amplified, unleashed raw acoustic devastation. KRYL. Ships caught in the unexpected maelstrom bucked and twisted violently. Their formations dissolved into chaos as their movements became erratic and disjointed. "What in the blazes?" Viper exclaimed, her eyes glued to the chaotic tactical display. "It's working," the comms officer shouted, his voice ringing with elation. "The KRYLL are reeling, they're disengaging." Thorn watched, astonished, as the blockades started to unravel. The improvised sonic cannons, despite their jury-rigged construction, were causing havoc that he could only speculate on the agonizing torment inflicted on the KRYLL, their hypersensitive sensory organs assaulted by the amplified sonic frequencies. "That's our window," Thorn roared. "Viper, punch through, maximum velocity, let's shatter this blockade." Viper grinned, her eyes reflecting the red alert lights. "You got it, General, hold tight." The Dauntless lunged forward, its engines howling. Viper navigated the cruiser with audacious skill, threading the needle through the widening gaps in the KRYLL formation. Energy blasts hammered the shields, but the Dauntless pressed on, its own weapon arrays unleashing a relentless storm of laser fire and seeking missiles. "Corvettes, stay on my tail," Thorn commanded. "Transport, hold the line, we'll cover your six." The escorts followed the Dauntless' wake, blazing away. The transport, laden with crucial supplies, strained to maintain formation, its shields flickering under the constant barrage. The KRYLL, disoriented and confused, reacted sluggishly. Their retaliatory fire was scattered and inaccurate, but their sheer numbers presented an existential threat. The Dauntless sustained brutal damage, its shields weakening with each impact. "Shields at 60% and dropping," the tactical officer reported, his voice cracking under pressure. "We're taking catastrophic damage. Keep firing," Thorn bellowed. "We're almost through." Ahead, Thorn glimpsed the edge of the blockade, a narrow corridor of open space, a path leading to Hope's Stand. But the KRYLL were converging, their ships maneuvering to intercept them. "Brace for hard maneuvering," Viper yelled, executing a gut-wrenching turn. The cruiser groaned under the strain, its hull screaming in protest. Thorn gripped the armrests, his knuckles bone-white, that he could feel the concussive force of near misses through the deck plating, the sharp tang of burning circuits assaulting his nostrils. Then, with a final surge of power, the Dauntless burst through. They had pierced the blockade. The Dauntless drifted into orbit around Hope's Stand, its shields flickering precariously, its hull scored and scarred. The corvettes and the transport followed closely, bearing their own wounds. "Report," Thorn demanded, his voice raspy. "We're in orbit, sir," the comms officer stated, relief flooding his tone. "However, we've sustained heavy damage. Shields are at 20%. Hull integrity compromised in several sectors. The corvettes are in similar shape. The transport sustained moderate damage, but the cargo is still secure." Thorn exhaled slowly, deliberately. They had survived, but the fight was far from won. "Hail Petrova," he ordered. "Tell her we're in orbit, and tell her, thank you." Anya's image reappeared, her eyes reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. "Welcome to Hope's Stand, General Thorn," she said, her voice barely audible. "We're glad you're here." "The sentiment is mutual, Anya," Thorn replied, forcing a smile. "Now, let's get to work." On Hope's Stand, Sergei Petrova observed the celestial battle raging above. He stood alongside Elder Kai, the harsh wind buffeting them, the ground vibrating beneath their feet. "They answered the call," Kai murmured, his voice filled with wonder. "They actually answered." Sergei nodded, his heart swelling with a fragile hope, tempered by lingering apprehension that he had been plagued by doubt, that he had feared that they had been truly abandoned. But Thorn had defied his expectations. "It's a momentary reprieve," Sergei warned, his gaze fixed on the battered ships struggling to maintain orbit. "The KRYLL will return. We are still outmatched in every way." "But hope has been rekindled, Sergei," Kai replied, placing a hand on Sergei's shoulder. "And hope is a formidable weapon." Sergei met the elder's gaze, his face etched with weariness. He desperately wanted to believe him, that he needed to. "Let's pray you're right, Kai," Sergei said. "For the future of us all." Aboard the Dauntless, Thorn reviewed the damage assessments. The situation was dire. They were orbiting a besieged colony, confronting a superior adversary, hampered by limited supplies and a crippled fleet. "Viper," Thorn said, turning to his second-in-command. I need you to assemble a squad and head down to the surface. Evaluate the ground situation. Determine how we can bolster their defenses. Understood, General. Viper replied, her eyes radiating grim anticipation. Anything else, sir? Affirmative, Thorn said, his voice taking on a hard edge. Remind those KRYLL that Hope's stand isn't forgotten. Not ever again. As Viper prepared to depart, Thorn gazed out at the beleaguered colony, the flickering lights, the hastily constructed fortifications, the faces of the colonists, etched with defiance and dread. He recognized the overwhelming odds that confronted them. He recognized the desperation of their fight, but he also recognized that they were no longer fighting alone. And that, he thought, might be just sufficient to tip the scales. Humanity was worth saving. Even stranded on this backwater world, the coalition might have written them off, but he refused to. He couldn't, because if he did, what was the point of anything? The dauntless sacrifice. The dauntless groaned, a wounded iron beast refusing to yield. Klaxons shrieked, an atonal prelude to annihilation. As the warship punched through the KRLL cordon, Thorn's grip tightened on the command chair, knuckles bone white. The bridge a whirlwind of panicked gestures and bellowed directives. Molten droplets from a severed power line cast flickering shadows across his resolute features. Status report, he roared, his voice a bare thread in the cacophony. Lieutenant Vasquez, grime streaking her face, fought her way to the comm station. Multiple hull breaches, decks 4 through 7. General, atmospheric integrity compromised in engineering and hydroponics. Shield strength at 30% and collapsing. Thorn's jaw hardened. Damage control, life support, and engines are priority 1. Weapons, maintain fire. They will gain nothing. The Dauntless, forged in the crucible of countless battles, shuddered under the assault. KRYLL fighters, grotesque fusions of biology and metal, descended like carrion birds. Emerald beams sliced through the void, obliterating some, yet the swarm pressed on. A relentless torrent of chitin and malice, a jolting impact announced a KRYLL cruiser's strike on the port side, the tremor racing through the ship's skeletal frame. Brace for collision, Section C9. A frantic voice screamed. Thorn steeled himself as the deck bucked beneath him, but a section of the viewport exploded, showering the bridge in crystalline fragments. Ignoring the needle prick of glass on his cheek, his gaze remained fixed on the swirling maelstrom beyond. They had pierced the blockade's heart, but the cost was bleeding away their lifeblood. The Dauntless was listing, a crippled predator dragging itself home. Navigation, set a course for Hope's stand. Get us down now, he barked. Course plotted, General. The navigator replied, his voice tight with strain. But engine thrust is failing under heavy fire, ETA, uncertain. Uncertain. Thorn despised the word. It reeked of lost control. A concession to the capricious whims of fate. He glanced at the tactical display, a holographic overview of their dire straits. The KRYLL fleet pursued, a cloud of enraged wasps harrying their stricken prey. That he needed to buy time, to give the colonists a chance at survival. Communications, patch me through to Anya Petrova. He ordered. Anya's image flickered to life, her features etched with worry but radiating resolve. Behind her, Thorn glimpsed the ad hoc command center, a buzzing hive defying the approaching darkness. General Thorn, she stated, her voice a beacon of calm amidst the storm. We saw you break through, but your ship is feeling the strain. Thorn finished. We're going down, but we need your sonic array primed. Target the KRYLL ground deployments. They'll be landing soon enough. Anya gave a curt nod, her eyes burning with steely determination. Consider it done. General, we've been anticipating this moment. On the surface of Hope's stand, the ground trembled as KRYLL dropships, like metallic locusts, plunged through the atmosphere. Anya stood on the command platform, her gaze unwavering as the monstrous vessels landed, disgorging swarms of KRYLL warriors onto the arid landscape. All batteries, prepare to engage, she commanded, her voice echoing across the colony. Target primary landing zones. Let's remind these invaders what we stand for. With a symphony of unleashed energy, the colony's sonic cannons pulsed to life. Invisible waves of amplified sound scythed through the air, impacting the KRYLL warriors with devastating consequences. The results were both immediate and gruesome. Chitin armor shattered, internal structures vibrated to pieces, and bodies erupted in a gruesome rain of alien viscera. The sonic cannons, born as a defense against native predators, had found a new, horrifying purpose. Anya watched, a mixture of grim satisfaction and quiet horror swirling within her, as the KRYLL forces were eviscerated. A massacre, perhaps, but a necessary one. Sustain fire, she ordered. Maintain pressure until every last one is neutralized. Aboard the Dauntless, the situation edged closer to disaster. The ship bucked violently as it slammed into the atmosphere, failing shields screaming under the searing heat of re-entry. Thorn felt the G-forces compress him against the chair, his vision tunneling. Losing altitude rapidly, the pilot shouted, "We won't reach a designated landing zone." Thorn gritted his teeth. "Locate the most level ground you can find. We're going in hard." The Dauntless hurtled towards the planet, a burning brand searing the sky. The ground rushed up with terrifying speed. Thorn closed his eyes, bracing for impact. The crash was a shattering cataclysm. The ship impacted with earth-rending force, gouging a trench in the soil and sending shockwaves reverberating across the land. The bridge plunged into darkness as systems died. Debris rained down, a steel and plastic tempest. Thorn was hurled forward, his head cracking against the console. He lay, momentarily stunned, the echoes of the crash still ringing in his ears. Slowly, agonizingly, he pushed himself up, his body a symphony of aches, his head a throbbing drum. "Report," he rasped, his voice a raw whisper. Silence greeted him. He stumbled to his feet. Navigating through the ruin of the bridge, he found Vasquez slumped against a wall, unconscious. He searched for a pulse, faint, but present. He moved on, searching for life. The scene was one of absolute devastation. Exposed wires sparked, consoles smoldered, and the air carried the sharp bite of ozone mingling with burning metal. At last, he reached the communications station. The operator, a young ensign, clung to life by a thread. "General," he gasped, his voice a bare whisper. We crashed badly." "Obvious," Thorn acknowledged grimly. "Can you transmit a message to Anya Petrova?" The ensign nodded weakly, fumbling with the damaged controls. "I'll try." After a moment of feverish effort, a garbled signal stuttered through the comm system. "Anya Petrova, this is Dauntless," the ensign stammered. "We have crashed near Sector 4. Then, with a last exhalation, he slumped forward, his hand falling lifelessly from the controls. Thorn stared at the vacant eyes, his heart weighed down by grief. Another life extinguished in this desperate fight. He turned to the comm system, his voice amplified with urgency. "Anya, can you hear me? This is Thorn. We've crashed near Sector 4. We require immediate assistance. Respond." A moment of silence stretched, heavy with uncertainty. Then, a voice cut through the static. "General Thorn, we read you. We are en route. Hold your position." Thorn released a shaky breath. They were alive. They had reached the ground. But the battle was far from won. The Dauntless was crippled, the KRYLL remained a threat, and Hope's stand clung precariously to existence. He looked out through the breached viewport, his gaze drawn to the distant horizon, where the first fingers of dawn sliced through the darkness. Hope, he mused, was a fragile flame, yet it was also a potent weapon. And while even a flicker remained, they would continue to fight. His thoughts broke apart beneath a lance of pain in his side. He glanced down to see a fragment of shrapnel embedded in his armor, a crimson stain spreading across the material. He ripped it free, ignoring the cauterizing agony. More urgent matters demanded his attention. He needed to rally the survivors, establish a defensive perimeter, and brace for the inevitable KRYLL reprisal. The Dauntless lay grounded, yet it remained a valuable prize, and he had no intention of allowing it to fall into enemy hands. He drew a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He was a general, a protector, a soldier. He would not abandon Hope's stand. Not now, not ever. He clambered from the wreckage of the bridge, emerging into the raw, unfiltered light of dawn. The air reeked of burning metal and resonated with the distant thunder of war. He could discern the shapes of KRYLL warriors in the distance, drawn to the crash site like scavengers to a carcass. He drew his sidearm, a pulse pistol, its familiar heft a source of comfort. He was outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. But he felt no fear. He had faced greater odds before, and he had always found a way. He raised his voice. calling out to the survivors emerging from the mangled remains of the ship. "Soldiers, listen up. We've suffered a grievous wound, but we are not defeated. We must establish a perimeter around the crash site. Secure any weapons and supplies you can find that we will hold this ground until reinforcements arrive." His words mingled with fear and determination. Yet he could see the nascent flame of hope in their eyes. They were weary, wounded, and afraid. But they were, above all, soldiers, and they would follow. Together, they began to scavenge, setting up barricades and fortifying their position for the coming onslaught. The Dauntless was a ruined shell, a testament to their sacrifice, but it stood also as a symbol of their unbreakable will. They would defend it to the last. The fight for hope's stand had truly begun. Nexus arrives. The earth bucked beneath Thorn's boots, a seismic shudder unlike the familiar, skittering approach of KRYLL. This was a deeper resonance, a primal tremor that vibrated through his very core, that he tightened his grip on the lancer, the chainsword's teeth a cold comfort against his sweating palm. Around him, the tattered remnants of the dauntless crew huddled in a fractured circle, their faces masks of exhaustion and smeared gore. The air hung thick and expectant, laced with the sharp tang of spent ordnance and the cloying sweetness of KRYLL viscera. "What in God's name?" Diaz croaked, his voice a ragged whisper against the whine of the sonic array. Thorn offered no reply. The sudden, absolute silence was answer enough. The incessant, chitinous clamor had vanished, replaced by an unsettling stillness that pressed down on them like a shroud. Then, a growl ripped through the quiet, a sound both guttural and monstrous, resonating from the heart of the swarm, that a path unfolded before them, carved not by force, but by a chilling deference. The endless tide of armored bodies peeled back, revealing a figure that defied all previous horrors, vastly larger than any drone elite he had encountered on Sarah. Its carapace shimmered with an unsettling iridescence of obsidian and crimson, pulsing with an internal light that seemed to distort the very air. Too colossal, scythe-like claws dripped a viscous, inky fluid. A bony crest, like a mockery of a royal diadem, crowned its head, which swiveled with glacial slowness, locking crimson eyes on the embattled humans. That's not just KRYLL, Diaz breathed, his voice strangled with dread. "No," Thorn confirmed, his own voice a gravelly whisper. "That's something else entirely." Anya's voice crackled over the comms, frantic. "Thorn, report. Sensors are overloaded. Massive energy signature detected." "We've got company, Anya," Thorn replied, his gaze unwavering. "Significant company, and I doubt it's here for a social call." Nexus, as the name resonated instinctively in Thorn's mind, moved with a startling swiftness that belied its immense bulk. It devoured the distance between the swarm and their meager defense in mere heartbeats, each step sending shockwaves through the devastated landscape. The initial strike was devastating. A wave of raw, concussive force erupted from Nexus, slamming into the human lines. Soldiers were flung aside like discarded toys, limbs contorted in grotesque angles. The makeshift barricades of wreckage splintered and shattered, showering the air with deadly debris. Thorn roared, adrenaline flooding his system. "Hold the line! Open fire, damn you!" The surviving members of the dauntless crew responded with a furious barrage, bolter rounds and lancer fire tearing through the tense atmosphere. The projectiles impacted against Nexus's hide, sparking and glancing off harmlessly. The behemoth remained unfazed. With a casual flick of its wrist, Nexus unleashed a gush of black, corrosive bile. The stream engulfed a group of soldiers huddled behind a wrecked transport, dissolving armor and flesh in a horrifying display. Their screams were abruptly silenced as they were consumed, leaving only smoking pits in the scorched earth. Thorn charged, his chainsword screaming to life. He dodged a sweeping claw, the rush of displaced air whipping past him, and lunged at Nexus's leg. The chainsword bit into the creature's flesh, showering them both in ichor and sparks, but the wound was merely superficial. Nexus bellowed in pain and incandescent rage, its crimson eyes burning with malignant focus. The other claw lashed out, catching Thorn a sickening blow across the chest. The impact sent him hurtling backward, his armor buckling like tin foil. He slammed into a heap of rubble, the air forced from his lungs. The metallic tang of blood filled his mouth as he fought to breathe. Through the ringing in his ears, the cacophony of battle raged. The staccato rhythm of bolters, the anguished cries of the wounded and dying, The earth-shattering roars of Nexus, he dragged himself to his feet. Ignoring the white-hot agony radiating from his ribs, the situation was spiraling out of control with terrifying speed. The dauntless crew, valiant as they were hopelessly outmatched. Anya's voice, laced with hysteria, blared over the comms. "Thorn, what's happening? We're taking critical damage. The KRYLL are breaching the perimeter." Thorn glanced toward the colony, and his heart sank. Lights flickered and died as the KRYLL swarmed over the outer defenses like locusts. The sonic array, their only true defense against the horde, struggled to hold them back. Nexus's arrival had shattered their strategy, plunging them into chaos that he watched, helpless, as Nexus swatted a heavy bolter emplacement aside as if it were a child's toy, scattering the crew into a gruesome mess. The monster was systematically dismantling their defenses, crushing any semblance of hope. A cold, hard certainty settled upon him. If Nexus wasn't stopped, Hope's stand was finished, and with it, the survivors of the Dauntless. He activated his comm again, his voice grim and resolute. "Anya, reroute all available power to the sonic array. Target its full output on my position that I'm going to try and draw its attention." "Thorn, no, that's insane. It's suicide," Anya cried, her voice thick with despair. "Maybe," Thorn conceded, his eyes locked on the monstrous figure. "But it's our only shot." He cut the connection, unwilling to listen to further arguments that he knew what he had to do. Grabbing a handful of fragmentation grenades from his belt, he charged back into the inferno. "For Hope's stand," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the ravaged landscape. "For humanity." He hurled the grenades at Nexus, the explosions briefly obscuring the creature in a swirling cloud of smoke and shrapnel. The blasts barely scratched its hide, but they served their purpose. Nexus's burning gaze snapped to Thorn, its full, undivided attention fixed upon him. Thorn knew he couldn't defeat Nexus in a direct confrontation. He was outgunned, outmatched, out of time. But he could stall that, he could distract it. He could buy Anya the precious seconds she needed to unleash the full might of the sonic array. He dodged another lethal swipe. Narrowly avoiding being bisected, he unleashed a stream of lancer fire, the rounds peppering Nexus's carapace. He kept moving, weaving between the scant cover, harassing the beast, drawing its wrath. Each near miss, each desperate maneuver, brought him closer to the precipice. Exhaustion gnawed at him, his movements growing sluggish, his reflexes dulled, but he couldn't falter. Not now. Not when everything hung in the balance. Suddenly, a searing lance of pain shot up his leg. He glanced down to see a jagged shard of chitin, propelled from a previous explosion, buried deep in his thigh. He cried out, a strangled sound of agony, and stumbled, his vision swimming. Nexus pounced, seizing its opportunity. It lunged, its massive claws reaching for him, promising oblivion. Thorn braced himself, his eyes squeezed shut, anticipating the inevitable, but the end never came. Instead, a cataclysmic roar ripped through the air, a sound that dwarfed even Nexus's monstrous bellows. The ground beneath him trembled violently, and a surge of raw energy washed over him. He blinked, his eyes open to see Nexus reeling, its iridescent carapace glowing with an unholy light. The creature staggered backward, its movements erratic, its roars dissolving into pained shrieks. The sonic array. Anya had done it. She had locked its power onto Nexus. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The energy waves scrambled the creature's nervous system, causing its body to convulse in a grotesque parody of life. Its carapace cracked and shattered, revealing the throbbing, alien flesh beneath. Nexus thrashed wildly, its claws ripping through the air in blind agony, its body twisting and contorting. Then, with a final, earth-shattering roar that seemed to tear the very fabric of reality, it collapsed to the ground, its body smoking and twitching. Silence descended once more, broken only by the crackling hum of the overloaded sonic array and the ragged gasps of the survivors. Thorn lay sprawled on the ground, his body a symphony of aches and bruises, his leg throbbing with torment. But he was alive, and Hope's stand still stood. That he looked towards the colony, and saw the lights flickering back to life, one by one. Like defiant sparks in the encroaching darkness, he heard the distant cheers of the colonists, their voices raw with relief and profound gratitude they had endured. They had stared into the abyss and emerged, however battered, into the light. But Thorn knew this was only a temporary reprieve, a fragile victory in a war yet unwon. The KRYL would return. They would learn, they would adapt, they would regroup, and next time, they might not be so easily vanquished. He gazed up at the inky canvas of the night sky, at the distant, indifferent stars. The fight for Hope's stand was far from over. It had only just begun. The battle against Nexus had been won, but the war for survival was still raging, and the stakes were higher than ever before. The survivors of Hope's stand had been granted a second chance, a precious opportunity to prove their resilience. They had been abandoned, seemingly forgotten, but they had refused to succumb, and now they had a commander, a broken and weary commander, who would stand shoulder to shoulder with them and fight until his last breath. Humanity would not be extinguished, not here, not now. Duel of Wills. The deck of the Dauntless vibrated under Thorn's worn boots as Nexus, a monstrous effigy against the blood-soaked sky, reared into view. A high-pitched whine assaulted his ears, followed by an unnerving hollowness, the kind that clings to deserted battlefields. The KRYL, momentarily paralyzed, swarmed around the corpse of their leader, an ebony swarm without a queen. Eris, he snapped into the comm, his voice a taut wire. Report. A burst of static, and then Eris's voice, shaky but intelligible. Alive. Barely. Blast shield saved me. I'm running diagnostics on the Nexus remains. The internal architecture is unprecedented. Think biomechanical, laced with an energy web unlike anything we've documented. I'm hunting for weak points, but I need time. Time, a dwindling resource. The KRYL wouldn't stay docile for long. Thorn tightened his grip on the familiar heft of his pulse rifle, a meager comfort in the face of such overwhelming darkness. A noxious effluvium radiated from the obliterated Nexus, a cloying, repellent heat. Eris, give me something solid. A chink in their armor, anything. The energy web. It's concentrated around what seems to be a central Nexus. If you could fracture that. But General, the plating is impenetrable. Doubt even your rifle could pierce it. Thorn offered no reply. Already moving. He leaped over a buckled girder, the Dauntless a gruesome tapestry of destruction. The air hung heavy with the tang of burnt matter and KRYL viscera. He needed to buy Anya breathing room. Time to shore up the sonic array. Time to hustle the remaining colonists to safety. Time for, he couldn't quite articulate it. Time, a commodity they desperately lacked. Reaching the edge of the carnage, his gaze locked onto the KRYL. They were beginning to twitch back to life, their chitinous carapaces clicking and grinding against the ruined metal. He scanned their ranks, looking for a head honcho, a linchpin for their collective will. Then he spotted it. A KRYL, towering above the others, sheathed in thicker armor, pushed its way through the horde. Its mandibles snapped with predatory hunger, and its eyes, twin emerald shards of malice, bore into Thorn. This one was different. It moved with a focused resolve the others lacked. It barked orders, guttural clicks, vibrating in Thorn's very bones. Not just a grunt. This was a leader. Thorn shouldered his pulse rifle, drew a bead, and unleashed a volley. The concentrated energy ripped through the contaminated air, slamming into the KRYL commander's chest. But instead of ripping through the exoskeletal armor, the blast seemed to dissipate, leaving just a superficial scorch. The commander hissed, a sound laced with pure, distilled hate. It surged forward, its razor-sharp claws carving through the air. Thorn dived, narrowly dodging the swipe. The impact reverberated through the ravaged deck. He needed a new plan. Now. Eris, any breakthroughs? Thorn panted, scrambling away from a follow-up strike, his rifle clattering across the iron floor, still crunching the data. General, the energy matrix is fiercely intricate. But I think I'm onto something. Resonance frequency. If you can somehow match it, you might be able to disrupt the matrix and compromise the armor. Resonance frequency? You expect me to hum a tune at it? Thorn spat, grabbing his weapon, sending the parameters now. It's more of a vibrational signature that you'll need to modulate your weapon's energy output. Numbers and waveforms cascaded across Thorn's HUD. He barely grasped the science behind it. He punched in the sequence on his rifle, trying to replicate the pattern. A long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. The KRYL commander charged again, its bladed limbs an iridescent blur. Thorn fired, funneling the modulated energy into a focused beam. The shot impacted the commander's chest, and this time, things changed. The KRYLL commander staggered, a piercing shriek tearing from its mandibles. The armor plating around the point of impact began to spiderweb and crumble. The modified energy was having an effect. Thorn capitalized on the opening, firing shot after shot, each pulse weakening the commander's defenses. Yet, the commander showed no signs of yielding. It batted aside the energy blasts with its claws, closing the gap between them. Thorn understood he was out of time. He tossed the pulse rifle aside and drew his combat knife. This was about to become intimate. The KRYLL commander roared, spittle showering Thorn's face as it slashed. Thorn weaved under the attack, his knife a silver flicker in the dim light. He aimed for the soft spots in the commander's armor, the weak junctures where the chitinous plates met. The blade found purchase, sinking into the yielding flesh beneath the carapace. The commander shrieked anew, stumbling backward. Thorn lunged, his knife a blur of motion in the crimson-tinged gloom. He was fighting for Hope's stand, for Anya, for the ghosts of those already lost. He blocked a blow, the jarring force radiating through his arm. He could feel the encroachment of exhaustion, his muscles screaming, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He couldn't afford to stop. He feinted left, then thrust right, plunging his knife deep into the commander's throat. The commander spasmed, its body bucking, its eyes fading. It swayed, then crashed to the deck, its armored form clanging against the metal. Thorn stood over the fallen foe, chest heaving, body trembling. He had prevailed. Yet, the triumph felt hollow. The KRYLL, sensing their leader's demise, faltered. They milled about, disorganized, confused. Thorn knew it was only a brief reprieve. They would regroup, they would find another general, and they would return. Eris, he rasped, his voice raw. The commander's down. But they'll be back. We need to solidify the defenses. Get everyone you can to the main bunker. Understood, General, Eris responded. I'm coordinating the evacuation now, but, General, I'm detecting a colossal energy spike that it's emanating from the KRYLL. Thorn frowned, a knot forming in his stomach. What kind of surge? Unprecedented, General. That's almost as if they're tapping into some kind of hive mind collective. A shiver crawled down Thorn's spine. This was dire. He surveyed the desolate arena, the carnage, the devastation. He had provided a moment's pause. But time was a currency they couldn't afford. The KRYLL were adapting, evolving. They were morphing into something even more menacing. He glanced toward Hope's stand, the faint constellation of lights in the distance. A fragile promise against the encroaching shadows. He needed to shield them. He had to discover a way to thwart the KRYLL, even if it demanded everything. He accessed the comms again, aiming his message toward Anya. His tone was somber, his resolve unflinching. Anya, this is Thorn. The KRYLL are amassing. I can't say what they're planning, but it's major. Brace for impact. And Anya, thank you for everything. He didn't await a response. He knew what he must do. He turned back toward the KRYLL swarm, his combat knife catching the crimson light. He was ready to fight. He was ready to die. He wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Anya Petrova, deep within the main bunker, felt a sudden chill. Despite the stifling heat, the Thorn's warning resonated in her skull, a grim omen. The KRYLL are amassing. Brace for impact. Her hands shook as she squeezed the scavenged comms unit, assembled from salvaged scraps. She tried to reach Thorn again, but met only static. Thorn, do you read me? Thorn. A cold knot of fear tightened within her, threatening to unravel her resolve. She scanned the faces of the colonists, a blend of dread and fragile hope etched onto their weary countenances. Elder Kai stood beside her, his eyes shut in silent supplication. She had pledged them sanctuary. She had promised them a future. Now, the future looked bleak, uncertain. Thorn's valor had provided a brief window, but the clock was ticking. Eris's voice broke through the static, slicing through her despair. Anya, I've analyzed the energy surge, coordinated psychic amplification. The KRYLL are preparing to unleash a devastating psychic wave that could overwhelm our shields. Anya's mind raced. They had reached the end of their rope. Out of time. But she wouldn't yield. Not now. Not ever. Her gaze fell on the sonic array controls, an intricate web of switches and dials that IT was their last chance, their ultimate gamble. But another overload could fatally destabilize the infrastructure, collapsing the bunker. Eris, what are the risks of another overload? Substantial. Anya, the structure is already compromised. Another surge could trigger a catastrophic failure. Anya closed her eyes, wrestling with the impossible choice. Preserve the structural integrity and risk being crushed by the KRYLL wave, or overload the array, risking a cave-in, burying them all alive. Elder Kai placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly firm. Anya, he stated, his voice steady and calm. We have stared into the abyss before. We have endured. Trust your intuition, trust and hope. Anya looked at the faces of the colonists, their eyes filled with expectation, with belief. She couldn't fail them. She decided. Eris, prepare for another overload. Maximum capacity. Override all safety protocols. Anya, are you certain? This could be suicide. It's our only option, Eris.do it. Anya took a deep breath and positioned her hand over the activation switch. She closed her eyes, envisioning Thorn, his bravery, his sacrifice. She envisioned the future, a new dawn for Hope's stand. With a surge of will, she flipped the switch. The sonic array hummed, then thundered, channeling the full force of its energy. The bunker quaked, the walls creaking beneath the strain. Outside, the KRYLL energy surge reached its pinnacle, a blinding torrent of psychic force. The two energies collided, a cataclysmic storm of sound and fury. The ground bucked, the air crackled with electrical discharge. Anya braced herself, body trembling, mind focused on the task at hand. She needed to endure. She needed to believe. She needed to hope. Tunnel rat. Dust motes pirouette in the narrow beam of Anya's headlamp, each a miniature galaxy in the close, stale atmosphere. The tunnel pinched, barely allowing two abreast, its corrugated metal pressing cold and dewy against her shoulders. Behind, Corporal Rodriguez flowed with a quiet efficiency that belied her armor's bulk. Rifle poised point. Two other colonists, Elias and Mara, trailed, their faces set in stark lines carved by the meager light. How much further? Elias's voice, strung tight with unease, rasped against Anya's already jangled nerves. Close, Anya reassured, aiming for a conviction she didn't feel. She consulted the salvaged metal shard bearing their map, a faded testament from the colony's nascent days. The main network lies about 50 meters ahead. That's where the KRYLL commander is headed, if my gut is right. Her gut. All they had left was instinct. Thorn's sacrifice had granted them precious moments, but the KRYLL were an inexorable tide. They surged, driven by a ravenous hunger, a chilling intellect Anya struggled to grasp. They were converging, drawn to the colony like iron filings to a magnet. Stopping them was her only purpose. And if it's wrong? Mara's question was barely audible. Anya halted, the lamp washing over Mara's drawn features. Fear had etched canyons around her eyes. Then we fall, Anya stated, the words devoid of inflection. But we'll make them pay for every inch. Understood? Mara nodded, eyes fixed on the dirt floor. Elias fidgeted, his grip tightening on the repurposed mining tool, now a makeshift shock weapon. Civilians, unwillingly conscripted into a conflict, armed with meager resources and raw courage. They were all she could count on. Anya pressed on, the air in the tunnel growing heavy, oppressive. The silence itself seemed to listen, broken only by the sporadic plink of water, echoing in the confined space. The tunnels felt poised, expectant. Rodriguez. Anya breathed into her calm. Anything. An agonizing pause, punctuated by static. Then Rodriguez's voice, calm and professional, sliced through the noise. Negative, Petrova. Still clear, but seismic activity is spiking. They're massing somewhere above us, without a doubt. Anya's stomach twisted. The psychic tremored. Eris's warning resonated in her mind. Overloading the sonic array was a long shot, a gamble that could shatter everything. They reached the nexus, a confluence of 3 tunnels diverging into the darkness. The air here possessed a noticeable warmth, laced with the sharp, metallic tang, the unmistakable reek of the KRYLL. Anya raised a hand, signaling halt. This is it, she murmured. Rodriguez, secure the choke point. Eyes on all 3. Elias, Mara, with me. We set the charges. Rodriguez melted into the shadows at the far end of the intersection, a phantom in the gloom. Anya placed unwavering faith in her, a survivor, forged in the fires of countless battles, a warrior unblinking in the face of death, the kind of soldier Anya aspired to be. Anya led Elias and Mara into the central tunnel, deeper into the KRWL's domain. The walls glistened with a viscous secretion, and the very air thrummed with a low, bestial drone. The KRYL were near. Here, Anya instructed, stopping at a recessed alcove carved into the wall. This is where we spring the trap. Elias and Mara exchanged anxious glances. The alcove was shrouded, clammy, and heavy with the aroma of decay. It felt like an open grave. Anya unslung a satchel, displaying a collection of scavenged explosives, mining charges, cobbled together grenades, whatever destructive tool she could procure. We'll daisy chain these to a remote detonator, she explained, her tone measured and firm. When the commander breaches, we collapse the tunnel. Rodriguez will provide suppressing fire. She worked with swift precision, her hands moving with practiced ease. For months, she'd haunted these tunnels, gleaning resources, mending the colony's lifelines. She knew every contour, every secret passage. The tunnels were etched in her mind. Elias and Mara pitched in, their fear temporarily eclipsed by the task at hand. They interconnected the charges, verified the detonator, and settled into the alcove, vigilant. Time stretched, each tick an eternity. The KRWL's drone intensified, growing closer. Anya could feel the vibrations resonating in her very bones. Rodriguez, she whispered into the calm. Situation? They're coming, Rodriguez replied, barely audible. I've got movement in the north tunnel. Looks like 5, 6 of them, and something far uglier bringing up the rear. The KRYL commander, Anya's pulse hammered against her ribs. This was the crucible. Everyone ready? She asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Elias and Mara nodded, faces ashen but resolute. Anya drew a deep breath and clutched the detonator. Let's show them some hospitality. The Vanguard KRYL materialized within the tunnel, their chitinous armor gleaming in the scant light. They advanced with a scuttling, insectal rhythm, their eyes burning with malevolent awareness. Trailing them was the commander, a mountainous behemoth of sinew and carapace, its mandibles oozing with acidic spittle. Now, Anya roared, slamming her thumb onto the detonator. The tunnel exploded in a searing flash and a concussive blast. The alcove shuddered violently as the charges ripped apart the rock, sending shards hurtling through the air. The tunnel imploded, burying the leading KRWL beneath a cascade of debris. Yet the commander remained upright, its colossal form only superficially wounded. It bellowed in rage, its gaze locked onto the alcove shielding Anya and her team. Rodriguez. Anya screamed into her calm. Take it out. A fusillade of gunfire ripped through the tunnel. Rodriguez's sniper rifle barked with lethal precision, each round finding purchase on the KRYL commander's exposed anatomy. The creature faltered, its movements becoming erratic and uncontrolled. Anya, Elias, and Mara erupted from the alcove, weapons raised. They fired indiscriminately into the swirling smoke and dust, grasping for purchase. The KRYL commander charged, its immense claws rending the air. Anya barely managed to evade a killing blow. Elias discharged his shock weapon, the electrical current dancing across the commander's hide. The creature recoiled, momentarily disabled. Mara hurled a grenade, the resulting blast reverberating through the tunnel. The commander roared in agony, its body spasming. It wasn't sufficient. The commander backhanded Mara aside like an insect, sending her crashing into the tunnel wall. She lay unmoving. Elias screamed and surged forward, his mining tool arcing through the air. The commander lashed out, its claws shredding through his armor like tissue. Elias collapsed, his body convulsing on the ground. Anya stood alone. The KRYL commander towered over her, its eyes blazing with animosity. It raised its claws, poised to deliver the final strike. Anya squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable, but the blow never landed. Instead, she heard a thunderous crack, followed by a sickening squelch. She opened her eyes to see the KRYL commander tottering, a smoking crater marring its head. Rodriguez stood at the tunnel entrance, her rifle still smoking. She had spared Anya's life. Again, let's move, Rodriguez stated, her voice flat. We're not secure here. Anya nodded, her body seized with shock. She joined Rodriguez in dragging Mara and Elias from the tunnel, their bodies limp and broken. They lived, but just barely. They retreated through the tunnels, abandoning the carnage they had unleashed. The KRYL commander had fallen, but Anya knew it was a fleeting reprieve. More would come. Always more. Emerging from the tunnels, Anya glanced skyward. The stars still shone. Pinpricks of light in the inky expanse that a reminder of the ember of hope that persisted. Within her, even against insurmountable odds, they had secured this engagement. But the conflict raged on, and Anya knew, with a bone-chilling certainty, that the worst was yet to unfold. The trap sprung. Shale crunched under Thorn's boots. The echoes magnified in the cavern's oppressive silence. He tightened his grip on the lancer, its familiar heft a meager bulwark against the encroaching gloom. He felt the KRYL, a palpable wrongness emanating from the tunnels ahead, a silent malevolence that raised gooseflesh on his arms. Come on, you overgrown beetle, he baited, his voice booming through the helmet's comms, bravado masking the icy dread coiling in his gut. He was the lure, drawing the KRYL commander into Anya's meticulously crafted trap. He could only pray it was sufficient that a staccato burst ripped from his lancer, crimson streaks carving into the rock face, showering the space with dust and stone shards. The display served as a blatant insult, a gauntlet thrown before the unseen foe that a bestial roar tore through. The cavern, an immediate reply. The air thrummed with raw power, a tremor vibrating through the ground beneath Thorn's feet, and no need to see it. He knew what was coming. The KRYL commander was taking the bait that he retreated in measured steps, eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance, coaxing the creature deeper into the kill zone. The scrape of chitin on stone, the click of mandibles, a ghastly orchestra that prickled his spine. A quick glance over his shoulder revealed two crimson eyes, like embers in the void, followed by the monstrous form of the KRYL commander, a grotesque mosaic of plates and sinew. Faster than predicted, it closed the gap with alarming alacrity. Now, Anya, he barked into the comm, urgency tightening his vocal cords. Now, above, the cavern roof rippled, the air shimmering from unleashed power. An unbearable, high-pitched whine escalated as energy surged. Then, the sonic cannons erupted. A concussive wave of pure sound slammed into the KRYL commander, a tangible force that staggered the beast. Its shriek transcended pain, entering the realm of pure agony. The exoskeleton vibrated violently, fissures spiderwebbing across its surface as the sonic waves shredded its form. Thorn shielded his eyes from the searing light. Accompanying the blast, the vibrations resonated in his very bones, pressure mounting in his ears until it was almost unbearable. It was working. The KRYL commander faltered, dazed, vulnerable. The sonic cannons ceased their assault, leaving a ringing void in their wake. Thorn lowered his lancer, eyes narrowed on the KRYL commander, still alive, but diminished. Its movements lacked coordination, its armor cracked and smoking. Finish it. Anya's voice crackled, sharp and insistent. Finish it now. He leveled his weapon, ready to deliver the coup de grace, but the creature roared once more, a sound of defiance that resonated through the cavern's bedrock. He paused, momentarily taken aback by the sheer force of its will. That hesitation proved catastrophic. With a sudden surge, the KRYL commander unleashed a wave of raw energy, a concussive pulse that radiated outward like a shockwave. Thorn barely reacted, diving for cover as the wave washed over him. The cavern convulsed, rocks bombarded. Down from the ceiling, then, unsettling silence. Thorn pushed himself upright, ears ringing, muscles screaming. He scanned the cavern roof, expecting the sonic cannons to recharge. They remained silent, inoperative. Anya, he called into the comm, voice strained. Anya, report. Static hissed in his ear, followed by Anya's faint, desperate tones. We're down, General. The energy wave overloaded the system. Cannons are offline. Thorn bit back a curse. The trap had sprung, but failed to kill. Merely wounded. The beast was now cornered and fueled by rage. He refocused on the KRYL commander, still erect, swaying slightly, but its eyes blazed with renewed intensity. The sonic blast had weakened it, yes, but it had also unleashed a savage fury, amplifying its danger. It lunged, faster than before. Mandibles snapping inches from Thorn's face, he dodged and rolled, narrowly avoiding the strike, the displaced air whistling past. His ear that he scrambled back to his feet, raising his lancer, but the KRYLL commander was upon him, a chitinous blur that he triggered the chain's word, the blade screaming through the air, but the creature deflected it with a single swipe of its immense claw. The impact sent the lancer spiraling from his grasp, clattering uselessly against the rock wall. Disarmed, defenseless, the KRYLL commander roared. A triumphant sound that echoed through the chamber. It reared up, towering over Thorn, casting him in. Shadow that he stared up at the monstrous entity, heart hammering against his ribs that he was out of time. Suddenly, detonations erupted within the tunnel behind the KRYLL commander. The ground bucked. Debris cascaded from above. Momentarily distracted, the KRYLL commander turned its head toward the commotion. It roared in frustration and began pivoting back toward Thorn. But it was too late. Anya's voice crackled over the comms, strained with effort. "We're collapsing the tunnel. Thorn, get out of there." Thorn grinned. "About time," he said into the comm, then turned toward the KRYLL commander. "Looks like your invitation just got revoked, Bug." He bolted toward the tunnel entrance, evading falling rocks, ignoring the grinding sound of the cave-in behind him. But a fleeting glance over his shoulder revealed the KRYLL commander struggling against the collapsing debris, its massive frame thrashing. Then, the tunnel sealed completely, entombing the creature beneath tons of rock and shale. He stumbled free, coughing and choking on the rising dust cloud. The entrance was now a solid barricade. He turned to find Anya nearby, her face pale, yet resolute. "Are you all right, General?" she inquired. "I'll live," Thorn replied, wiping grime from his face. "But that was a little too close for comfort. Next time, try not to keep me waiting." Anya's expression remained grim. "There won't be a next time, General," she stated bleakly. "We exhausted our supply of explosives." Thorn's smile vanished. He surveyed the collapsed tunnel, then turned to Anya. The KRYLL commander was contained, but for how long? "And what of the remaining KRYLL? We bought some breathing room," he stated, striving for optimism, but the truth hung heavy. This was no victory, merely a postponement. The sonic cannons silenced, their explosives depleted, and the KRYLL still lurked, awaiting their moment. The forgotten colony of Hope's stand remained isolated as Anya looked up at the Stygian sky. A sense of foreboding settled over her. The battle might be over, but the war had just begun. The stars appeared distant and uncaring, reminders of a humanity that had cast them aside. Yet, within her, a spark of defiance flared. They would persevere. They must, for Thorn, for Kai, for all who had placed their faith in Hope's stand. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. A general sacrifice. Thorn hacked, his mouth brimming with the sharp, coppery taste of blood. Each shallow inhale was a fresh torment, his fractured ribs a chorus of agony threatening to drown him. Grit assaulted his tongue, along with a bitter aftertaste, likely from the malfunctioning sonic emitter's residue. A rockfall, triggered by the cave-in, had imprisoned him beneath a heavy slab. Anya, her face etched with worry and exhaustion, wrestled with the stone, her muscles screaming in protest. "Forget it, Anya," he croaked, his voice barely audible. "It's hopeless." "Don't say that, General," she snapped, her grip unwavering. "We're getting you out." He saw the raw desperation blazing in her pupils, an unwillingness to yield that mirrored his own stubborn resistance against the encroaching void. But reality was a cold mistress. He felt life draining from him, a slow, relentless leak. "The KRYLL," he wheezed, gesturing feebly towards the collapsed passage. Secured, Anya remained focused, her resolve absolute. "For now, but the tunnel won't hold indefinitely. We need to move, and you require immediate aid." He knew the score. The sequence, however, was the killer. "Anya," he pressed, a flicker of strength returning. "Listen, it's hurt, but not for long. If it breaks free." He didn't need to spell out the nightmare. The image of the KRYLL commander, a beacon of malice and brutal force, was indelibly etched in their minds. "We'll find a way," she countered, her voice trembling slightly. Thorn's eyes closed. As he clawed for the scraps of his remaining energy, he recalled the faces of the colonists, Their hope ignited as his dropships had pierced the atmosphere, Kai's unshakable belief, children clutching their mothers, a weariness hardened into resolve on every face. He couldn't fail them. Not now. Not after enduring so much. He forced his lids open, locking onto Anya's gaze. No asterisk you asterisk won't. Asterisk I asterisk will. He strained against the rock, defying the molten fire searing his frame. Anya, caught off guard, nearly lost her purchase. "What are you doing?" she cried, her tone laced with panic. "Helping," he grunted, his voice tight but resolute. "Now, get out of here, gather supplies, prepare for its return." Anya shook her head, tears brimming. "I can't leave you." "You must," Thorn insisted. "Your people need you. Hope Stan needs you. Stop wasting precious time arguing." Another surge of adrenaline coursed through him as he pushed again. The rock grudgingly shifted, revealing a narrow opening. "Enough. Go," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the claustrophobic space. Anya hesitated, her countenance a battleground of conflicting emotions. Then, with a choked sob, she whirled and vanished into the gloom of the tunnel. Thorn was utterly alone that he drew a deep, shuddering breath, each one a victory against the encroaching darkness. He detected the faint, grating sound from beyond the collapse. The unmistakable noise of the KRYLL commander struggling against its prison. Time was running out. He fumbled inside his shredded vest, his fingers finding the familiar, cold grip of his combat knife. That it was all that remained, a paltry weapon against such a monstrosity. But it would have to suffice. Ignoring the agonizing shriek of his abused body, he rolled onto his side and began to crawl toward the blockage. Jagged edges tore at his skin, and dust mingled with debris choked his lungs. But he pressed on. Fueled by relentless purpose, he reached the barrier, the air heavy with the reek of KRYLL, ichor, and ozone. The creature thrashed beyond, its roars muffled but still terrifying. He discovered a thin crack in the debris, just wide enough to peer through. The sight that greeted him was enough to make even the steeliest heart falter. The KRYLL commander was a repulsive travesty of nature, a mountain of chitin and sinew, its myriad eyes burning with untamed fury. The sonic blast had clearly wounded it, leaving scorched patches and a useless limb. However, it was far from vanquished. With relentless strength, its remaining limbs hammered against the debris, widening the fractures. Freedom was only moments away. Thorn knew he had a single, desperate shot. He had to exploit its injured state, its blinding rage. He had to close the distance. He took another deep breath, bracing himself. This was it that he began to dig, clawing furiously at the rocks and debris, expanding the opening, sensing his presence. The KRYLL commander doubled its efforts, its roars crescendoing into a deafening cacophony. The crevice expanded. Thorn felt the creature's hot, rancid breath on his face, smelled the metallic tang of its blood. The burning hatred radiating from its razor-sharp claws was almost palpable. He squeezed through the opening. Dismissing the pain that threatened to overwhelm him, he stood face to face with the KRYLL commander. The creature staggered back slightly, shocked by his audacity. Its many eyes narrowed in disbelief, unable to fathom why such an insignificant speck of flesh and bone would dare to defy it. Thorn offered no reprieve that he lunged forward, fueled by pure adrenaline and fragile hope, scrambling over rubble, dodging clumsy swipes. He sought the weakness he had glimpsed during the battle, the vulnerable flesh beneath the wrecked carapace. He reached its flank, narrowly avoiding a blow that would have bisected him. He saw the exposed flesh, raw and pulsating. Beneath the shattered armor, he raised his combat knife, his hand trembling with exhaustion and suffering. For an instant, he closed his eyes, seeing the colonists' faces, the weight of their belief in him. Then, with a final burst of might, he plunged the knife deep into the creature's flesh. The KRYLL commander emitted an ear-shattering shriek, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that reverberated through the tunnel. That it thrashed violently, its immense frame convulsing, sending shockwaves through the ground. Clinging tightly, Thorn twisted the knife. Burying it deeper, he could feel the creature's life ebbing, its struggles growing feeble. The shrieks waned, replaced by a low, guttural moan. Its movement slowed, limbs twitching erratically. The eyes, once blazing with hatred, began to dull. Then, with a final, earth-shattering groan, the KRYLL commander collapsed. Its massive form crashed to the ground, unleashing a cloud of dust and debris. Thorn lay trapped, his body crushed and broken beneath the Titan's weight. But the pain was inconsequential. A profound peace washed over him. The satisfaction of a mission fulfilled. He had succeeded. He had saved them. He closed his eyes. A faint smile gracing his lips, Anya's face floated before him. Her eyes alight with hope and gratitude. He saw Kai, radiant with faith. He heard the laughter of children. He had given them a chance to rebuild, to survive, to recall the meaning of humanity. Darkness enfolded him. Its embrace gentled. He welcomed it. Knowing he had fought with honor, he had remained steadfast. He was a soldier. He had executed his duty. As his life slipped away, a faint sound reached his ears in the distance. The sound of hope, the sound of humanity, confusion and regroup. The ground bucked beneath her, a jarring, uneven dance unlike the KRYLL's trampling march, bruised and reeling from the cave-in. Anya gripped the sonic array's console, her vision blurring at the edges. The signal, once a piercing, unified chorus of clicks and static, now coughed and died. What in God's name? Kai's voice, tight with a caution she hadn't witnessed in weeks, sliced through the lingering tinnitus. He stood close, his time-worn features holding a fragile spark of optimism. I don't know. Anya confessed, her fingers dancing across the console. The KRYLL signal that shattered all over the place. The tactical display echoed the chaos. The relentless crimson wave of KRYLL, a force that had threatened to drown the colony, now faltered. Some milled listlessly, others darted in unpredictable directions, their movements devoid of their usual, terrifying cohesion. Outside, the automated turrets, stubbornly alive, were reaping a grim harvest, devoid of a single purpose. The KRYLL were easy prey, cut down in swathes by the relentless barrage. The cacophony of explosions and shrieks still assaulted the ears, but the oppressive feeling of doom had abated. The air, though thick with smoke, held the faintest scent of possibility. Anya risked a glance toward the caved-in entrance. Dust billowed, obscuring everything. Thorn. The thought brought a fresh surge of grief and nausea. She choked it down, anchoring herself to the present. Thorn's sacrifice had gifted them this reprieve. They had to seize it. Kai, she said, her voice regaining purchase. Alert everyone. Tell them to counterattack. Press the advantage of their disarray. Kai nodded, his eyes ignited with purpose. They're hungry for this. Anya, they won't squander it. As Kai turned to relay the command, Anya patched through to the fleet. Viper, Hope's stand. The KRYLL are in disarray. I repeat, they're in disarray. Initiate offensive maneuvers. A crackle of static, then Viper's voice, energized and keen. Roger that. Hope's stand. We're seeing the same thing. Finally, a break our way. Stand by for air support. We're going to fry those damned insects. The sky roared as the Earth fleet, emboldened by the sudden reversal, surged forward. Fighters streaked across the heavens, unleashing a storm of missiles and lasers. Bombers, previously relegated to defense, now pummeled the KRYLL formations with impunity. Anya watched the display, a somber satisfaction settling within her. The balance had shifted, however precariously, but she understood it wouldn't last. The KRYLL were a force of nature, and nature always found a way. Kai, she said, her gaze fixed on the screen, how are the wounded faring? Holding on, he replied, rejoining her. Doc's pulling miracles with scraps, but we're bleeding dry. Anya. Meds, rations, ammunition. Anya sighed. The triumph, if one could call it that, was tainted. They had clawed their way through another day, but the long-term forecast remained bleak. We'll navigate this, she stated, more to steel herself than to reassure Kai. We always find a way. Outside, the battle raged. Colonists, brandishing everything from salvaged rifles to improvised flamethrowers, streamed from their shelters and joined the fray. They moved with savage resolve, fueled by desperation and the memory of Thorn's valor. Anya watched them, her heart a knot of pride and sorrow. That a motley band of farmers and miners, teachers and mechanics, ordinary souls forged into warriors, the forgotten, the abandoned. Yet they refused to break. Hours dissolved in a whirlwind of combat and desperate coordination. Despite their initial fragmentation, the KRYL began to coalesce, their primal instincts overriding the loss of their direction. The struggle intensified, the casualties swelled. Yet, this time felt different. This time, the colonists tasted hope. This time, they possessed the support of the Earth fleet overhead. This time, they struck back as twilight descended, casting the ravaged landscape in hues of amber and violet. The KRYL assault finally ebbed. The last few creatures, confused and leaderless, slunk into the shadows, leaving behind a field of death and ruin. Anya stood on the ramparts, taking in the aftermath. The air hung heavy with the charnel scent of burnt flesh and the harsh bite of explosives. The ground was scarred and blackened, the structures broken, but Hope's stand still stood proud that a cheer erupted from the colonists, a raw and heartfelt expression of relief and victory. They congregated in the town square, their faces smudged with grime and exhaustion, but their eyes ablaze with hard-won triumph. Kai approached Anya, a weary smile tugging at his lips. "We did it, Anya, that we actually did it." Anya nodded, her throat thick with emotion. "We did," she breathed. The colonists began to celebrate, sharing their meager provisions. Someone strummed a mournful melody on a battered harmonica, and others joined in, singing ancient songs of earth, songs of hope and tenacity. Anya watched them, her heart aching for Thorn, but brimming with a deep respect for the people under her charge. They had endured so much, yet found the strength to sing, to laugh, to hope. That Viper's voice crackled through the comms once more. "Hope stand. This is Viper. We're pulling back to orbit for resupply. We'll be back tomorrow." "Understood, Viper," Anya replied. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, Anya," Viper said, a newfound edge to her tone. "This is only a breath. Those insects will return, with a vengeance. We need a viable strategy, and we need it now." Anya knew Viper spoke truth. The reprieve was fleeting. The war raged on. But for tonight, they would celebrate. They would grieve their fallen, and they would sharpen their blades for the battles ahead. As the music and song drifted, Anya pulled away from the crowd, seeking solitude. She ascended to the highest point of the colony, a wrecked observation tower offering a sweeping vista of the surrounding wasteland. She lifted her gaze to the night sky, to the familiar constellations that had guided her. Forebears, they appeared distant, indifferent to the plight of this tiny colony on this forgotten world. But Anya refused to yield to despair. She had witnessed the resilience of her people, the valor of Thorn, the unwavering faith of Kai. She knew they could endure. They had to. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and offered a silent prayer to the stars, that a prayer for hope, for strength, and for the future of Hope's stand. The wind howled around her, carrying the scent of smoke and death, but also a soft whisper of hope. And in that moment, Anya knew that even when faced with impossible odds, they would not yield. They would endure. They would fight. They would survive. They had no other choice. Anya turned her gaze back to the colony. The lights flickered like defiant embers in the face of encroaching darkness. The music and laughter persisted, a testament to the unyielding spirit of mankind. That IT was a small beacon in a vast and uncaring universe, but it was a light worth shielding. She descended from the tower, her steps steady and resolute. She had a colony to shepherd, a war to prosecute, and a future to build. And she would not fail them, not while hope still burned. Reinforcements from the swarm. The klaxon's wail sliced through the fragile calm blanketing Hope's stand, shattering the illusion of peace like glass. Anya bolted from her makeshift command center in the comms room, her pulse a frantic drum against her sternum. The brief interlude, that stolen time for tending the ravaged and interring the fallen, was brutally rescinded. "Immediate report," she snapped into the comm, her voice strained. "Commander Petrova, we're detecting colossal energy signatures." Lieutenant Chin's voice crackled, laced with apprehension. "KRYL Armada, inbound. The numbers, they're unprecedented, exceeding anything encountered before." Anya's breath caught. More? After the gauntlet they'd run, after Thorn's ultimate sacrifice, the KRYL were unleashing yet another wave? She lunged toward the main monitor as Chin's data splashed across the screen, painting a dire tableau that a constellation of vermilion blips, each denoting a KRYLL war vessel, sprawled across the sensor grid, making the valiant, yet meager, Earth fleet appear minuscule. Battered but unbowed, the Earth ships moved to engage, their energy cannons erupting in furious defiance against the KRYLL vanguard. A suicide mission, Anya knew grimly. They were hopelessly outnumbered, outgunned, and agonizingly low on ordnance. The phantom image of General Thorne flickered in her mind, his careworn gaze, the resolute set of his jaw, the unyielding conviction that had anchored him to this desolate rock that he gifted them a chance, purchased them precious time. But that time had almost run its course. A hand rested on her shoulder. She turned to face Elder Kai, his weathered features lined with concern, yet his eyes held a glimmer of steadfast belief. "They have returned, child," he murmured, his voice a deep resonance. "The encroaching darkness hungers to consume us all." Anya summoned a mirthless smile. "Then we shall illuminate the darkness, Elder," she responded, a tremor barely audible in her voice. "We shall demonstrate that hope's stand will not succumb so readily." She pivoted back to the comms. "Lieutenant Chun, deliver a comprehensive threat assessment, prioritizing surface-bound targets." "Working diligently, Commander," Chun replied, urgency bleeding into his tone. "But they're hurtling in at breakneck speed. Estimated time to impact? 15 minutes. 15 minutes to prepare, to strategize, to somehow conjure a path to survival. An impossible ultimatum. A priority message blinked on her console. "Commander Khan, Viper to the Earth fleet." Her avatar displayed her soot-streaked face, her expression grave. "Petrova," she stated, her voice crackling across the comms. "We're engaging, but this is beyond dire. We can't contain them for long. Planet-side status. Defenses are minimally operational, Commander," Anya answered. "The sonic array is compromised, and ground forces are spread perilously thin. We are bracing for total planetary invasion." Khan cursed, a clipped, vehement eruption. "Damn it all. Right, listen closely. We'll bleed for every second we can buy. But you must be prepared. This will be a battle for survival itself." Silence descended as Khan diverted her focus back to the escalating maelstrom above. A glacial dread gripped Anya's insides. This surpassed mere attack. This was an all-out incursion. A KRYLL tsunami poised to engulf Hope's stand and extinguish it forevermore. She glanced at Elder Kai, absorbed in silent supplication, his lips forming a silent litany. She yearned to share his unwavering faith, his unshakable trust in something beyond, but all she could muster was a fierce determination to safeguard her people, to vindicate Thorne's sacrifice, to nurture the ember of hope, even amidst the encroaching void. "Damage assessment on the sonic array now," she barked at a nearby technician. "I want it reactivated, even at diminished capacity, and mobilize every capable colonist. We must fortify the perimeter, immediately." The comms room throbbed with activity as her directives were transmitted. Colonists, faces grim but resolute, scrambled to designated posts, grabbing weaponry and girding themselves for the inevitable onslaught. Anya watched them, her heart swelling with simultaneous pride and trepidation. They were cultivators and miners, not warriors. But they were the sole bulwark between Hope's stand and utter obliteration. A holographic display sputtered to life, depicting a tactical overview of the colony. The hastily erected outer defenses, remnants of the previous incursion, looked woefully inadequate against the descending KRYLL swarm. "Commander Petrova," a voice announced. "General Thorne requesting a secure channel." "Thorne?" But he was gone. A surge of elation, swiftly countered by doubt, surged through her. "Patch him through," she whispered, scarcely audible. The holographic display shifted, and Thorne's image materialized before her. He seemed altered, ethereal, fading in and out of definition. Yet, undeniably, it was him. His eyes, the familiar creases etched around his mouth, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Anya," he said, his voice a muted echo. "I haven't journeyed far." "General," she breathed, her voice choked with emotion. "But how?" "A narrative for another juncture," he said, his image flickering. For now, you must maintain focus that I perceive what you face. They are unleashing their full fury. We are hopelessly outnumbered, General, Anya said, despair creeping into her voice. The Earth fleet is fighting valiantly, but they cannot hold them at bay indefinitely. I am aware, Thorn said, his image stabilizing marginally. But you are not alone, Anya. You possess the courage of your people, the strength of your convictions, and you have something else, that in element they fail to anticipate. He paused, his gaze locking with hers. Recall what I conveyed, Anya, regarding the KRYLL, regarding their connection to this world. You disrupted their signal previously. You are capable of repeating it. Anya's eyes widened. The collapse, the disruption, it was not mere happenstance. IT had revealed a chink in their armor, a vulnerability in the KRLL's intricate system. But how, General? She asked, her mind racing. The caverns are unstable. We cannot risk another cataclysm. Returning to the caves is unnecessary, Thorn said, his voice diminishing. The signal, it originates from the very nucleus of the swarm. Locate the nexus, disrupt it, and a fighting chance will emerge. His image flickered erratically, then began to dissipate. Remember Anya, he whispered. Hope remains. And then he was gone. Anya stood alone in the comms room, the weight of her responsibility a tangible pressure. Commander Petrova, Lieutenant Chin's voice cut through her reverie. KRYLL vessels are breaching the Earth fleet's defensive line. Impact is imminent. Anya inhaled deeply, fortifying herself. Thorn's words reverberated in her mind. Locate the nexus. Disrupt the signal. A long shot, a desperate wager, but it represented their sole remaining recourse. Lieutenant Chun, she stated, her voice clear and resolute. I require you to analyze the KRYLL Armada's communications array. Identify the primary command vessel, the one orchestrating the invasion. Engaged in the task, Commander, Chen replied. But it will be arduous. Their channels are encrypted. Then breach the encryption, Anya said. Utilize any means necessary. Our very survival hinges on it. She turned to the colonists in the comms room, their faces etched with a mixture of dread and determination. We know our mission. The hour to act has arrived. For hope stand. As the first KRYLL warships punctured the atmosphere, unleashing a tempest of fire and carnage upon the colony, Anya mobilized her people, preparing a daring counteroffensive. The destiny of hope stand, and perhaps humanity's, teetered precariously. Anya sent a secure comm to Commander Khan. Viper, Petrova here. We've formulated a plan. A long shot, to be sure, but a plan nonetheless. Keep them occupied up there. Grant us a sliver of opportunity to execute it. Khan's response was terse and professional, yet Anya detected an undercurrent. Respect? Perhaps hope? Understood. Petrova will maintain the line for as long as humanly possible. Good luck. The connection terminated. Anya turned back to her colonists. All right, everyone, she called out, her voice infused with newfound resolve. Let's show them what we're forged from. Let's exemplify the very essence of hope's stand. The colonists roared their affirmation, a defiant cry that echoed across the beleaguered colony. Anya Petrova, the reluctant leader, the resilient survivor, the beacon of hope amid a darkening galaxy, stood prepared to confront the storm. The KRYLL were descending, but so was she, into the nebula. All ships, immediate vector change. Thorn's voice, crackling with dire urgency, jolted Anya despite the adrenaline already flooding her system. We're pulling back into the Cygnus fade. Stunned silence met the announcement, broken only by the whisper of static. The Cygnus fade. Not merely a nebula, but a starship sepulcher, a churning vortex of electromagnetic storms and capricious gravity. Anya's grip tightened on her command chair, knuckles bone white. As she dissected the fade in tactical sims, trials pushing pilots and navigators to their breaking points. Always, the outcome was the same. Crushed hulls and voiceless screams. General, are you certain? Jax, even the unflappable ace, sounded unnerved. The fade is suicide. Those electromagnetic maelstrom will shred us before the KRYLL even get within range. I understand your apprehension, Jax. Thorn's tone, though firm, remained composed. A direct confrontation is a guaranteed loss that we require leverage, an element of surprise that KRYLL won't anticipate. He paused. Anya could almost picture him on the Valiant S bridge, his gaze fixed on the roiling chaos ahead. The Cygnus Fade offers a natural screen. Its unique electromagnetic signature will hamper KRYLL communications, disrupt their coordination, that we can weaponize their greatest asset, their unified consciousness. With respect, General, Jax countered, his voice rising in pitch. That's assuming we survive the cosmic spin cycle. We carry civilians. General, this gamble risks everything. Their lives are at risk now, Jax, Thorn retorted, steel entering his voice. Waiting for the inevitable assault assures annihilation. This offers a chance, that a slender one, granted, but a chance nonetheless that I refuse to stand by while hope's stand is snuffed out. A long, heavy quiet descended. Anya felt the oppressive weight of the decision, the command center thick with tension. Logically, Thorn's point held firm. Yet, the fade felt like a plunge into the infinite dark. Finally, Jax exhaled, a sound of surrender. Understood, General, but if I become celestial confetti, I'm haunting your command deck. I'll look forward to it, Jax, Thorn chuckled, the sound a sliver of light. Now, all ships, execute the course change. Prepare for fade entry. Navigation crews, close formations are vital that we stand together or fall alone. Zara. Viper, anticipate course corrections as needed. Yes, sir, Viper responded crisply. Acknowledged, preparing for entry. Anya watched as the fleet responded, colossal warships pivoting ponderously, engines blazing as they adjusted their trajectory. Sensing the shift, the KRYLL armada surged, biovessels raining down corrosive projectiles. Brace for impact, Anya yelled, the first KRYLL blast slamming against Hope's stand defenses. The colony shuddered violently, but the shields held that for the moment. She glanced at Elder Kai, his face a roadmap of worry, but his eyes alight with unwavering faith. Brave are these Earth warriors, he murmured, his gaze transfixed on the swirling nebula. They choose to face the tempest rather than yield to the shadows. Anya nodded, her throat tight. Thorn and his fleet were wagering everything for them. For a colony the coalition had written off at a level of sacrifice beyond comprehension. Begin the jump. Thorn's voice resonated across the comms. May the stars guide us. The Valiant, leading the charge, surged towards the nebula's edge, shields shimmering under the KRYLL barrage point one by one. The other vessels followed, each a spark of defiance against the encroaching night. Anya watched as the Valiant vanished into the Cygnus Fade's chaotic embrace, swallowed by a maelstrom of light and shadow. Then, their turn arrived. Hope stand, prepare for entry, Anya announced, her voice amplified. Engines to full power, shields up. The colony ship, a lumbering giant compared to the sleek warships, groaned as it accelerated, its engines screaming against the gravitational strain. The KRYLL assault intensified, projectiles hammering the shields, threatening to tear them asunder. Anya held her breath as Hope's stand crossed the threshold, entering a realm of pure pandemonium. The viewport dissolved into a swirling kaleidoscope of colors, a dizzying blend of purples, blues, and emeralds. The ship bucked savagely, throwing Anya against her restraints. Alarms shrieked throughout the colony, warning of power surges and shield collapse. Report, Anya barked, struggling for composure. Electromagnetic interference is off the scale, Commander, a technician shouted. Navigation failing. We're losing control. Anya gripped her chair, heart hammering. The Cygnus Fade was living up to its grim reputation that a voracious beast, a force threatening to engulf them whole. We have to get through this, she muttered, as much to steel herself as inform the crew. We have to survive. Outside, the nebula raged, a cosmic symphony of annihilation. Lightning danced across the viewport, illuminating swirling clouds of gas and dust. Phantasmal energy signatures flickered into existence, distorting the very nature of space. Then, something unexpected occurred. The KRYLL assault faltered. Projectiles slowed, movements grew erratic. Their cohesion, their very strength, began to unravel. Commander, the KRYLL, they're disoriented, a sensor operator exclaimed in disbelief. Their targeting systems are malfunctioning. They're firing on each other. Anya stared at the readings, her mind reeling Thorn's plan. It was working. The Cygnus Fade was crippling the KRLL hive mind, turning their might against them. Maintain course, she ordered, her voice regaining its bite. Exploit their confusion. Show these monsters what happens when you corner a cornered animal. Hope's stand, battered but unbroken, plunged deeper into the nebula, weaving through the bedlam, dodging rogue energy surges and gravitational anomalies. The KRYLL, struggling to adapt, descended into disarray, their attacks increasingly futile. But the battle remained far from over. The Cygnus Fade was a capricious ally, and the KRYLL remained a terrifying force. The struggle for Hope's stand had entered a new chapter, a desperate gamble played out on the precipice of oblivion. As Hope's stand ventured further into the chaotic depths of the Fade, Viper's voice cut through the comms, sharp and urgent. General, we're detecting a massive energy signature ahead. It's unlike anything in our databases. Thorn's response was immediate. Report, Viper. Originating from the nebula's core, General, a concentrated electromagnetic source. It's a beacon, and the KRYLL, they're converging on it. Anya felt a prickle of unease. A beacon within the Cygnus Fade. General, I believe we've located the KRYLL nexus, Viper stated, awe and dread intertwining in her voice. The epicenter of their unified consciousness. Thorn went silent for a beat. Then, his voice returned, clear and unwavering. That's where we're headed. All ships, prepare for a coordinated assault. We're going to sever the head from the serpent. The KRYLL nexus stood a long shot, a desperate play. But their only hope. Anya stared out at the Cygnus Fade's violent dance, at the swirling colors and erupting energy. A place of terror, of death, but also a place of opportunity, where the impossible might just become reality. They were heading into the heart of darkness, into the very maw of the predator. But they would not yield, they would not falter. They would fight, for Hope's stand, for humanity's future, nebula warfare. The Cygnus Fade was a ravenous beast. Comms choked on static, instruments spasmed, and the nebula's electromagnetic turbulence tore its shields, impartial to Earth or KRYLL origin. Yet the KRYLL suffered acutely. Their usually seamless neural web, the bedrock of their peerless coordination, unraveled within the tempestuous energy. Viper to all, execute. Commander Zura Viper Khan's voice sliced through the cacophony, a beacon of resolve. Use their disarray, deliver swift, brutal strikes, then vanish. Khan watched as the KRYLL armada, once a menacing wall of bioengineered horror, fractured into a jittery collection of misaligned units. Confirmed, came Talon 2's concise report. They're practically colliding out there. No room for complacency, Khan countered. They remain KRYLL, deadly, follow the plan. The Viper's kiss slipped into an iridescent fold of interference, the nebula twisting its outline into a spectral echo. Her squadron mirrored her, poised for ambush, a masterwork of speed and agility. The Viper's kiss boasted hull plates forged from experimental alloys designed to weather the nebula's corrosive touch, and at its helm, Khan was a maelstrom of focused aggression, her reflexes finely honed, her mind a calculating engine of destruction. A hulking KRYLL destroyer blundered too close, its bioluminescent arteries flared haphazardly, its weapon arrays twitching in an apparent fit of disorientation. Now, Khan barked, unleashing a cascade of plasma fire. The Viper's kiss erupted from its hiding place. Cannons ablaze, Khan's assault hammered the destroyer's vulnerable power conduits. Blasts ripped through the hull, igniting chain reaction explosions within its organic frame. The destroyer convulsed, its bioluminescence sputtering out in a silent, spectacular demise. Talon Squadron, engage! Khan roared, already weaving the Viper's kiss back into the Fade's embrace. Her squadron followed suit, unleashing a storm of plasma and missiles. KRYLL fighters, caught flat-footed, were atomized in the initial onslaught. The nebula greedily consumed the light and thunder, leaving only the unsettling hum of warped energy in their wake. Heavy cruiser, direct hit. Talon 3's voice crackled with elation. It's burning, Viper. Maintain pressure, Khan directed. Allow no respite. The Earth fleet danced within the nebula's heart. Under the fighter's protective wing, destroyers and frigates launched long-range missile barges, further crippling the KRL's disorganized ranks. The Hope's stand, cloaked and silent, husbanded its energy, awaiting a more decisive opportunity. Admiral Thorne's gamble was paying dividends. The KRYL, accustomed to overwhelming force and lockstep coordination, were adrift in uncharted waters. Their hive mind, typically their greatest asset, became a hindrance as the nebula's influence muddled their signals, transforming synchronized assaults into a tangled mess. Aboard the flagship Dauntless, Thorne observed the unfolding battle on the main view screen. The nebula churned around them, a breathtaking yet lethal tapestry of color and energy. Report, Thorne commanded, his voice even amidst the chaos. KRYL losses are spiking, Admiral. Commander Reyes reported. Their formations are collapsing, attempts to re-establish command faltering under the nebula's effects. Excellent, Thorne affirmed. Exploit their vulnerabilities. Yet a shadow of doubt flickered across Thorne's features. This advantage was ephemeral. The KRYL were nothing if not adaptable. They would, inevitably, adjust. He turned towards Lieutenant Park, his comms officer. News from Hope's stand. Negative, Admiral. Park responded. Maintaining radio silence per your orders. Thorne nodded. He had entrusted Anya and the Hope's stand crew with a critical task. Locate and analyze the KRYL nexus within the nebula. The intelligence they gathered would be pivotal to the fleet's long-term strategy. Continue contact protocols, Thorne instructed. Notify me of any developments. Back within the Viper's kiss, Khan relished the pandemonium. She threaded her fighter through the flotsam of a destroyed KRYL cruiser, dodging chunks of burning biomatter and twisted metal. Her targeting system locked onto another KRYL fighter, its trajectory erratic. Time for target practice, Khan murmured, her fingers firm on the controls. That a brief burst of plasma obliterated the KRYL fighter. Another notch, Khan reported to her squadron. Anyone else feeling lucky? Just trying to keep pace, Viper. Talon forequipped, his tone a mixture of awe and exasperation. Khan grinned. She thrived in the crucible of combat, where skill and audacity were the only currency. A natural leader, a born warrior, she never backed down. Suddenly, a jarring alert blared across her console. The gargantuan KRYL warship, dwarfing anything she had encountered, clawed its way out of the nebula's depths. Its bioluminescence burned intensely, its weapon hardpoints glowing with malevolent energy. Warning, heavy contact, evasive maneuvers. Khan roared. The KRYL warship unleashed a torrent of energy, vaporizing stray KRYL fighters and scattering the remainder. Khan narrowly avoided the initial salvo, the Viper's kiss shuddering violently in the wake of the blasts. Now it gets interesting, she muttered, her gaze fixed on the warship. She couldn't engage it alone, but retreat was not an option. She had to buy time for the fleet to regroup. Viper to Dauntless, Khan reported, her voice unwavering. Situation critical. Aboard the Dauntless, Thorne's jaw tightened. He had foreseen this eventuality. The KRYL wouldn't remain crippled forever. Khan, disengage immediately, Thorne commanded. That warship outclasses you. Negative, Admiral, Khan replied. I can't abandon our position. It'll decimate our lines. That is an order, Commander, Thorne thundered. Respectfully, Admiral, Khan countered, her tone resolute. I have a duty. She severed the connection, preempting further argument. She disobeyed a direct order? Reyes exclaimed, incredulous. Thorne sighed. Khan possessed a fierce independence, but outright defiance was unexpected. She's buying us vital time. Thorne said that he studied the tactical display. The KRYL warship bore down on the Earth fleet, its weapons primed. All ships, brace for heavy engagement, Thorne ordered. Prepare to weather the storm. Khan, meanwhile, was flirting with death. The Viper's kiss pirouette through the warship's relentless firestorm, its shields flickering ominously. Nimble maneuvering kept her alive, leading the behemoth on a perilous chase. She knew her luck was finite. Shields were failing, energy reserves dwindling. But she would hold the line as long as possible. Then, she discerned a pattern in the warship's attacks that IT seemed to be focusing its energy on a singular point, a fissure in its bioengineered shell that a spark ignited within her. The desperate, high-stakes gamble. She steered the Viper's Kiss directly toward the warship, flying headlong into the path of the next energy blast, the precipice of annihilation. She executed a daring maneuver, harnessing the nebula's energy to conjure a fleeting distortion field around her fighter. The blast detonated against the field, convulsing the Viper's Kiss. Khan held firm, teeth gritted, eyes focused. Emerging from the maelstrom, she was battered but operational. She was now inches from the warship, its weak point exposed. Time to cash in, she muttered, triggering a final, desperate volley. The Viper's Kiss unleashed its remaining plasma reserves, striking the vulnerable point. The bolts pierced the armor and detonated within its core. The KRYLL warship convulsed violently, its bioluminescence faltering. Then, with a deafening roar, it detonated in a cataclysmic explosion. The Viper's Kiss was caught in the maelstrom, tossed around like a leaf. Khan fought for control, her senses overwhelmed. Finally, the Viper's Kiss limped out of the wreckage, bruised but airworthy. Khan inhaled deeply, her heart hammering. Viper to Dauntless, she reported, her voice raspy. Problem resolved. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Thorn permitted himself a small smile. He had underestimated Khan. She was more than just a pilot. She was a force to be reckoned with. Well done, Commander, Thorn said. You have earned accolades. Yet, he knew that this was merely one skirmish in a larger conflict. The KRYLL remained, and the nebula was a treacherous domain. The battle for Hope's stand was far from decided. The KRYLL nexus. Anya Petrova's gaze remained locked on the violet-streaked nebula dominating the main screen, worry creasing her forehead. Hope's stand clung to existence, a precarious grip aided only by Thorn's cannon emplacements, which had temporarily stemmed the KRYLL tide. But the respite felt fragile, the KRYLL evolving with unsettling speed, their attacks now displaying a chilling coordination. A semblance of purpose that IT was akin to an insect swarm orchestrating a calculated assault. Anything, Kai? Anya asked, turning to the elder, his face a roadmap of anxieties. He was a stooped figure before the console, fingers dancing across the holographic keys that a relic, indeed, of a lost age. Kai possessed an unmatched understanding of pre-collapse tech, even the elusive art of manipulating the Cygnus Fade's ethereal energies. Still parsing the signals, Anya, Kai rasped, his voice thin. The Fade, it whispers secrets that I'm striving to isolate the KRLL's fingerprints on its currents. The command center hung heavy with the stale, metallic scent of recycled air, interwoven with the crew's taut anticipation. Every blip and hum from the antiquated systems amplified the awareness of their desperate straits. Holographic projections shimmered, displaying perimeter integrity, sonic generator output, and the looming threat of the KRYLL advance. Then, a siren's shriek tore through the tension, an ear-splitting klaxon that sent nerves jangling. Report. Anya snapped, her hand moving without conscious thought toward the sidearm secured to her thigh. Energy surge, Commander, Lieutenant Markov announced, his complexion ashen. Origin, nebula interior, unidentified signature. Readings are off the scale. Anya moved closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing as she studied the anomaly. The nebula throbbed with an aberrant luminance, a pulsating, violet core that resonated with an ominous frequency. Magnify, she commanded. The image zoomed in, revealing a vortex of raw energy swirling deep within the nebula's heart. IT defied anything Anya had previously witnessed. The energy wasn't naturally occurring, but structured, organized, possessing an almost conscious design. Kai, your read on this? Anya asked, turning back to the elder. Kai stared at the image, his eyes widened in both wonder and apprehension. This surpasses anything I've encountered, he breathed, his voice barely audible. The KRYLL, they are harnessing the nebula, sculpting its essence. To what end? Anya pressed. Kai shook his head slowly. I cannot say, but I fear its implications are considerable. The thought sent a chill through Anya. The tactical coordination, the unnerving adaptability to IT all indicated a singular command. Could this energy signature be the source, the key to understanding and ultimately defeating the KRYLL? Markov, reroute all available sensor arrays to that location, she ordered. I want every scrap of data we can glean. Acknowledged, Commander, Markov responded, his fingers blurring across the console. The command center went silent, the crew fixated on their task. Moments bled into an eternity, punctuated only by the violet vortex's silent, baleful pulse. Finally, Markov broke the silence, his voice edged with tremor. Commander, I'm detecting a structured signal that IT resembles a network in neural architecture. A KRYLL network? Anya asked, her voice tight with dread. Affirmative, Commander. IT appears they're utilizing the nebula as a relay conduit, the central nexus for their entire collective. Anya felt a shiver crawl along her spine. A hive mind. It clarified everything. The KRYLL were not mere automatons, but a unified entity, linked by a central consciousness, and that intelligence emanated from the vortex within the nebula's depths. Can we pinpoint its exact origin? Anya queried. Markov worked feverishly, his brow furrowed. Almost. I have it. The signal originates from a structure, buried deep within the nebula's core, heavily shielded, but I'm catching glimpses. It looks like a biological processor. A biological processor. Anya envisioned a nightmarish lattice of living tissue and alien technology, throbbing with the KRYLL's shared awareness, a horrifying concept. Show me, she ordered. Markov pulled up a holographic schematic, a rough approximation of the structure concealed within the nebula. It was an immense, organic construction, awash in an eerie, violet glow. Tendrils of energy pulsed outward, extending into the swirling mists of the nebula, connecting it to the KRYLL swarm like veins to a heart. This is it, Anya stated, her voice grim. The KRYLL nexus, the wellspring of their power. The realization crashed over her. Destroying this nexus could cripple the KRYLL, fracture their hive mind, and offer Hope's stand a fighting chance. But the task would be immense. The nexus was heavily protected and nestled in the most perilous reaches of the nebula. Commander, Markov interrupted. We're detecting a significant increase in KRYLL activity around the nexus. They're reinforcing their defenses. They know we've located it, Anya said, her tone hardening. They anticipate our arrival. Anya turned toward Kai. Can you leverage the fade to our advantage? Disrupt their network, even momentarily? Kai nodded, a steely resolve in his eyes. I can attempt it, Anya, but it will be fraught with peril. The fade is a tempestuous force. Manipulating it can trigger unforeseen repercussions. We have no alternative, Anya declared, her voice resolute. We must take the gamble. Anya paused, scrutinizing the faces of her crew. Weariness and trepidation were evident, but so was an unyielding determination. They were exhausted, beaten, and outnumbered, but their spirit remained intact. They were Hope's Stan's protectors, and they would not break. We're taking the war to them, Anya announced, her voice ringing with authority. We're going to strike at the KRYLL hive mind's heart and demonstrate the might of humanity's will. A wave of assent rippled through the command center. The crew comprehended the dangers, but they were prepared to fight to sacrifice themselves, if needed, for Hope's stand. Markov, assemble a strike team, Anya commanded. Our most skilled pilots and heavily armed vessels that we're going to breach the KRYLL's fortifications and obliterate that nexus. Aye, Commander, Markov replied, his voice imbued with renewed purpose. Anya faced the main display, her eyes fixed on the pulsating violet heart of the KRYLL nexus. She knew this mission was a desperate undertaking, a long shot, but it was their last, best hope. Prepare for warp jump, Anya ordered, her voice echoing through the command center. Destination, KRYLL nexus. The fate of Hope's stand, and perhaps humanity itself, hinged on this single, perilous venture. Anya Petrova, the unlikely leader of a forgotten colony, stood ready to guide her people into the abyss. The nebula loomed, its swirling energies and concealed hazards a reminder of the impossible odds they faced. But Anya Petrova would not falter. She would fight for Hope's stand, for humanity, for a future shrouded in uncertainty. As her ship surged towards the KRYL nexus, Anya gazed out at the stars, those distant beacons of a galaxy that had seemingly abandoned them. But they had not surrendered themselves, reprogramming the swarm. Anya's gaze locked onto the vortex swirling on the main screen. The captured KRYL communication hub pulsed with a power both alien and disturbingly familiar. The Cygnus Fade, a shimmering veil of purloined KRYL technology, cloaked the station, a precarious defense against detection. Beside her, Kai fought exhaustion, his augmented hand exhibiting a nervous tick. Modifications complete, Commander, Kai croaked, his voice sandpaper rough. Reprogramming sequence ready for initiation, whenever you are. Anya remained silent. The decision weighed on her like a leaden shroud. This surpassed merely safeguarding Hope's stand. Success here held the potential to cripple the entire KRYL collective across the galaxy. Billions of KRYL, their shared consciousness shattered, would be relegated to what? Isolated, unthinking entities? Or something far more sinister. Ethical dilemmas gnawed at her conscience. Did she possess the right to condemn an entire species, even one responsible for unimaginable devastation? Was she any different from the Coalition, who had bartered a colony for wider galactic peace? Thorne's unwavering conviction flashed in her memory. The inherent value of every human life. Irrespective of its seeming insignificance, he would act decisively. He would see the KRYL as a threat to be eradicated, a malignant growth to be excised. But Thorne was absent. And Anya had to make the call. What's the likeliest fallout from this, Kai? She inquired, her voice barely audible. Kai hesitated, his gaze flitting between the swirling energy and Anya's countenance. Hard to quantify. Commander, we're grappling with utterly alien tech. Optimistically, we disrupt their communication, scatter their forces, and buy breathing room. Pessimistically, a cascade effect. Mutations, infighting, unforeseen horrors. He paused, then quietly added, inaction guarantees annihilation. Anya shut her eyes, picturing the colonists, children, the elderly, farmers coaxing life from the arid soil, engineers nursing antiquated machinery. They had entrusted her with their lives. She couldn't betray that trust. Initiate the sequence, Kai, she commanded, her voice firm, masking the turmoil within. But prepare to abort the instant we detect anything anomalous. Kai nodded, his fingers dancing across the console. The hub's hum intensified, resonating in her very core. The vortex on the screen throbbed with an unearthly radiance, shifting from malignant crimson to a disturbing violet. Sequence engaged, Kai announced, overriding primary comm channel, speeding along much faster than anticipated. Anya watched, breath suspended, as lines of code, translated from KRYL biolinguistics by Kai's brilliance, cascaded down the display. Not destructive code, but disruptive, designed to sow discord into the KRYL's flawless, unified mind that TO reprogrammed the swarm's very essence. Abruptly, the station convulsed, klaxons wailed, flooding the compartment in scarlet light. Commander, massive energy spike detected. Kai yelled above the din. KRYL counterattack, trying to wrestle back control. Anya gripped the console's edge, her knuckles bone-white. Hold the line, Kai. Divert all available power to the Cygnus Fade. They can't breach our defenses. The station lurched violently again. Sparks erupted from the console, and static snapped in the air. Anya felt the weight of the KRYL collective while pressing against her, a crushing wave of raw animosity. I can't sustain it much longer, Commander. Kai gasped, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. They are adapting, deciphering our code. Time was running out. If the KRYL regained control, they were exposed, defenseless, finished. She had to gamble. Kai, hotwire the power conduit directly to the hub's core, she ordered, her voice slicing through the chaos. Bypass safeties, overload the system. Kai gaped, his eyes wide with disbelief. Commander, that's suicidal. We'll vaporize the hub. And ourselves. We have no recourse, Kai. Loss of control means the end for Hope's stand. Execute it. A microsecond of hesitation. Then Kai's fingers flew across the controls again. The hub's vibration intensified into a screaming crescendo, shaking the entire station. The violet light surged, blindingly intense. Then, silence descended. Alarms ceased. The station stilled. The crimson light receded, replaced by the pale glow of the monitors. Anya and Kai remained motionless, braced for retaliation, but it never came. Instead, the vortex on the screen flickered erratically, then shattered, dissolving into a chaotic jumble of static and fragmented code. The KRYLL communication hub was inert. Did we actually pull it off? Kai whispered, his voice trembling. Anya offered no reply. Her attention was glued to the sensor readings, painting a volatile tableau of KRYLL activity across the galaxy. The KRYLL swarm, once a seamless, unstoppable force, was now in disarray. Ships collided, squadrons broke formation. Entire fleets drifted aimlessly through the void. Reports poured in from distant outposts. KRYLL turning on each other. KRYLL scattering into the abyss. KRYLL simply shutting down. The hive mind was collapsing into disarray, but not cleanly. Chaotic, brutal, and terrifying. Point one screen showed a KRYLL cruiser, its hull riddled with breaches, aiming its weapons at another KRYLL vessel. A brief, savage exchange ensued, followed by dual, cataclysmic explosions. On another screen, a swarm of KRYLL fighters abandoned their assault on a coalition outpost, tearing into each other in a frenzy of internecine violence. The outpost, inexplicably spared, issued a frantic distress call, pleading for reinforcements that would never come. And on a third screen, Anya witnessed something that sent a frigid current down her spine. A KRYLL drone, its bioluminescent eyes glowing with an unsettling sentience, staring directly into the camera, not attacking, not fleeing, simply observing the AS. Though attempting to decipher the event, that a wave of dizziness swept over Anya. She had accomplished it. She had fractured the KRYLL hive mind. But at what unthinkable cost? She had unleashed chaos on a galactic scale. She had condemned billions of KRYLL to an unknown, potentially agonizing existence. And she had birthed something unpredictable, something conceivably even more perilous than the hive mind itself. "What have we wrought?" she breathed, her voice laced with dread. Kai rested a hand on her shoulder. "We survived, Commander. We bought hopes stand a shot at tomorrow." Anya looked at him, her eyes pools of uncertainty. Had she made the correct choice, or had she sealed their doom? Time alone held the answer. But one thing was sure. The galaxy had been irreversibly altered. The KRYLL, once a monolithic instrument of destruction, were now fractured, divided, volatile, and humanity, caught in the crossfire, would be compelled to adapt to this unfamiliar reality. As Anya stared out at the swirling nebula, she detected a faint blip on the sensors. The solitary KRYLL vessel, drifting towards the edge of charted space, not attacking, not running, simply departing. That as if driven to seek out something. A new beginning, or a new, uncharted horror. Anya couldn't know, but she knew that she would stand ready. Hope's stand would be poised for action. They had weathered the impossible previously. They would persevere through this as well. Yet, as she tracked the retreating KRYLL vessel, she could not dispel the foreboding that she had just unleashed something that would haunt them for generations to come. The KRYLL swarm had been reprogrammed, but at what price had Hope's stand paid for it? Only the unfolding future held the full judgment of Anya's decision, and she resolved to meet it head-on, whatever it might bring, victory and remembrance. The keening wail subsided first, a gradual softening that sent a tremor of disbelief through Anya. The KRYLL's ceaseless cries, an auditory plague for what felt like an eternity, had vanished. Now, only silence remained, punctuated by the ragged gasps of survivors clustered around her. Then, the earth stilled. Through the haze of pulverized rock and grit, Anya witnessed it, the seething mass of carapaces and talons. The overwhelming horde that had eclipsed the sun was dissipating, ebbing, like a phantom tide receding from a haunted shore. The KRYLL dissolved into the scarred fields and blighted forests surrounding Hope's stand. A cheer, raw and grating, erupted, yet vibrant with a life Anya had all but abandoned hope of hearing again. Sergei Petrova, his face haggard and smeared with grime, stood near, clutching his jury-rigged rifle. "They are gone?" he rasped, his voice thick with incredulity. "Not vanquished." Anya corrected, her gaze scanning the distant line where sky met ruin. Scattered, disoriented, they'll regroup. The triumph, palpable and real, was nonetheless precarious, a fleeting reprieve purchased at a horrific price. Above, the Earth fleet commenced its ponderous ballet of withdrawal. Vessels that had arrived gleaming and formidable now bore the marks of war. Hulls scorched by KRYL weaponry, energy shields sputtering weakly, salvaged KRYL craft, their alien geometry jarring against the familiar curves of human design, trailed in their wake. Even from the surface, Anya could sense the profound weariness emanating from the departing ships. They had fought, endured, and, against all expectations, prevailed. A battered dropship, its landing struts spitting sparks, angled down toward the crude landing zone near the command center. The same one that had delivered Thorn as the ramp groaned open. Commander Zara Viper Khan emerged, her features etched with exhaustion, though her eyes remained sharp and assessing. Petrova, Viper greeted, her voice roughened by disuse. Glad to see you haven't become KRYL Chow. Same to you, Commander. Anya returned, managing a tired smile. The fleet's pulling out? Packing up and shipping out. Immediate threat neutralized, sector stabilized, it's sufficient. A trace of bitterness laced Viper's tone. Command wants us back, wants the metal patched up. They're calling it a win. Anya understood the unspoken truth that a victory, yes, but one flavored with the acrid taste of abandonment. The KRYL menace persisted, a suppurating sore in the galaxy's flesh, and Hope's stand remained marooned, cut off, vulnerable. General Thorn requests your presence aboard the flagship, Viper added, her expression softening slightly. He wants to bid farewell. The flagship. Anya had deliberately avoided dwelling on Thorn. Her entire focus had been on survival, on addressing her people's immediate needs. But now, the stark reality of his departure slammed into her. He was leaving her to navigate the precarious future of Hope's stand. The shuttle flight to the flagship felt simultaneously fleeting and interminable. Each passing second brought her closer to Thorn, closer to the inevitable parting. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of corridors, bustling with frantic crew members, the air thick with the tang of ozone and burnt circuitry. Finally, she reached the command deck, where Thorn stood silhouetted against a vast viewport, contemplating the receding planet. He turned as she approached, his face etched with fatigue, yet his eyes still alight with their familiar spark of defiance. Anya, he greeted warmly. Thank you. For what, General? Anya countered, her throat constricted. For nearly getting us obliterated. Thorn chuckled, a low, resonant sound. For proving that even in the most forsaken reaches of the galaxy, hope can take root and blossom. You, Anya, are the embodiment of Hope's stand. He pivoted back to the viewport, his gaze drifting towards the cosmos. The Coalition views this place as a lost investment, a strategic drain. They'll likely write it off again. But I've seen what you can do. You faced the impossible and came out on the other side. Anya moved closer, her hand briefly resting on his arm. We endured because of you, General. You extended a lifeline when no one else would. Thorn demurred with a shake of his head. I simply reignited the strength that already resided within you. You led them, Anya. You made the gut-wrenching decisions. He paused, then faced her squarely. The Coalition has offered you a position, Anya, with the defense forces on Earth a chance to safeguard humanity on a far greater scale. Anya's heart quickened. The proposition was enticing. Incredibly so, to leave behind the desolation of Hope's stand, to enlist in Earth's defense forces, to confront the KRYL on a broader battlefield. But as she met Thorn's gaze, she perceived something more profound than mere gratitude or respect. He was entrusting her with a responsibility, something invaluable. I can't accept, General, she declared, her voice steady. Hope's stand is my home. These are my people. They depend on me. Thorn's expression softened with a sincere, heartfelt smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I anticipated that response, which is why I wanted to ask you face to face. Earth will prevail, Anya, but Hope's stand needs your leadership. He clapped her on the shoulder, his grip firm. Guide them wisely, Commander Petrova. Show them the true meaning of being human. The parting was concise, unspoken understandings hanging palpably in the AI. As Anya turned to depart, Thorn called out one final time. Anya, remember to look up at the stars. Recall that even in the vastness of space, you are never truly alone. Back on the surface, the enormity of rebuilding Hope's stand crashed over Anya like a tidal wave. The initial elation of victory had dissipated, displaced by the overwhelming burden of reconstructing a shattered society. Dwellings were reduced to heaps of rubble, fields lay barren and scorched, and the faces of her people were marked with sorrow and exhaustion. Sergei approached her, his characteristic cynicism supplanted by a quiet resolve. "What happens now, Anya?" he inquired, his eyes seeking hers. "How do we begin again?" Anya surveyed the devastation, the weary faces of her people, the sweeping expanse of the ravaged countryside. For a fleeting moment, despair threatened to drown her. But then, she recalled Thorn's words. "You are Hope's stand." She drew a deep breath, straightened her posture, and met Sergei's gaze. "We start by clearing the debris," she asserted, her voice ringing with clarity and strength. "We start by planting new seeds. We start by remembering those we have lost, and honoring their memory by forging a brighter future." And so they commenced, day after day. They labored, clearing rubble, salvaging materials, tending to the injured. They fashioned shelters from fragmented metal and reclaimed wood. They carefully rationed their dwindling supplies, sharing what meager resources they possessed with those in need. Elder Kai, his faith unshaken, led prayers of remembrance and renewal. He emphasized the importance of community, of the power that could be unlocked through unity, and gradually, painstakingly, a fragile hope began to reemerge in the ruins of Hope's stand. Children, who had known only fear and deprivation, began to rediscover laughter. Farmers coaxed life back into the cauterized soil, planting seeds with the hope of a future harvest. Engineers tinkered with salvage technology, seeking methods to bolster their defenses and communication. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, daubing the sky with strokes of crimson and violet, Anya stood on the highest point of the reconstructed command center, surveying the slowly revitalizing landscape. The KRYL remained a latent threat, lurking in the periphery, but they no longer possessed the same paralyzing terror. The people of Hope's stand had faced them, fought them, and survived. Anya lifted her gaze to the stars, recalling Thorn's parting words. She was not isolated. She had her people, her community, her purpose. And as she contemplated the distant constellations, a surge of optimism welled within her, an unwavering belief that even in the face of insurmountable odds, humanity could endure. Weeks bled into months that Hope's stand began to evolve into something more than merely a collection of survivors. New structures rose from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than their predecessors. The fields, once barren and lifeless, began to produce crops, providing sustenance for the burgeoning community. Anya, guided by her internal compass, instigated changes within Hope's stand. They opened their doors to refugees from other scattered settlements, providing them with sanctuary and support. They established an educational system, imparting the children with the skills necessary to rebuild their world. They formed a council, comprised of representatives from all sectors of the community, to ensure that everyone had a voice in shaping their destiny. One day, a crippled communication array sputtered back to life. The signal was faint, barely discernible, but it carried a transmission from Earth. The coalition, it seemed, had not entirely abandoned Hope's stand. They offered assistance, supplies, and the promise of future trade. Anya listened to the offer, her expression carefully guarded. She expressed gratitude for their concern, but clarified that Hope's stand was no longer dependent on their charity. They would accept the supplies, but they would also chart their own course, forging their own future. As the signal faded, Anya turned to Sergei, who stood beside her, his face etched with a blend of pride and exhaustion. "What are your thoughts?" she asked. "Should we place our trust in them?" Sergei shrugged. "Trust is a luxury we can ill afford, Anya. However, we can exploit them. We can utilize their resources to fortify our defenses, to revitalize our infrastructure. But we must never lose sight of the fact that we are ultimately alone." Anya nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We will remember," Sergei, we will never forget. Hope's stand was no longer simply a colony. It was a testament to resilience, to defiance, to the unyielding spirit of humanity. And under Anya's stewardship, it would continue to endure, a radiant beacon in the darkest corner of the galaxy. Anya's promise. The percussive rhythm of hammers reshaping metal resonated across Hope's stand, an assertion of life against the KLL's lingering, chilling silence. Dust-streaked and weary, Anya scrutinized the emergent structures, homes reborn with ingenuity born of necessity. They were evolving, learning from the harsh lessons etched in loss, their resolve now a bedrock deeper than the planet's frozen core. Gone were the haphazard arrangements, the vulnerability of huddled dwellings. Buildings now stood apart, linked by sturdy walkways, watchtowers punctuating the landscape. Anya's directive. Each residence a potential redoubt, every inhabitant a guardian, donning Thorn's repurposed armor, a constant, weighty memento of his sacrifice and her oath. She felt the burden of leadership, heavier still. Elder Kai approached, the roadmap of his years creasing into a rare, heartening smile. Commander Petrova, he rasped, voice strong despite its age, the water filtration systems online, exceeding pre-attack capacity. Anya mirrored his smile, warmth blossoming within her. Outstanding, Elder. A testament to your team's innovation. Still, vigilance with conservation is key, even with the surplus. Kai acknowledged this with a nod. Understood. Furthermore, the hydroponics lab reports robust germination in the novel crop varieties that we anticipate a significant yield increase next cycle. That lab, Anya's passion project, was a monument to the colony's burgeoning self-reliance. Scavenged coalition tech mingled with local resources, pushing the boundaries of sustainable cultivation, a vital safeguard against future isolation. Remarkable, Anya breathed, her gaze encompassing the vibrant scene. Hope's stand truly ascends from the ashes. A subterranean shudder rippled through the ground, not a KRYLL incursion, but the controlled demolition of the crippled reactor's remnants. That a more efficient geothermal system was taking its place, tapping into the planet's geothermal heart. Anya, immersed in schematics and alongside the engineers, had personally guided the project. The people possess an unyielding spirit, Commander, Kai observed, his eyes alight. They find hope reflected in your leadership. A pang of doubt pricked Anya. Was she truly deserving? Thorn had seen potential within her, something she still questioned existed. She was a soldier, not a savior. They're working tirelessly, she countered, deflecting the compliment. They grasped the stakes. Kai's surprisingly firm hand settled on her shoulder. They work tirelessly because of you. They see your dedication, your empathy. They see Thorn's legacy made manifest in your deeds. He paused, his expression softening. Tonight, upon completion of the repairs, we hold the inauguration. You will formally assume the mantle. It is their desire, their need. Anya hesitated, having evaded the ceremony for weeks, absorbed in the practicalities of survival. But Kai's words resonated. Hope's stand needed a symbol, a locus for their collective will. Very well, Elder, she acquiesced, her voice resolute. Tonight, I will embrace their trust. The inauguration, a humble affair, unfolded in the freshly christened town square. The air was crisp, redolent with pine and upturned earth, illuminated by the erratic dance of torchlight and the spectral glow of twin moons. The colonists gathered, a mosaic of disparate backgrounds, survivors from countless fallen settlements, united by hardship and an indomitable will to endure. Upon a makeshift platform, Anya stood, Thorn's armor glinting under the lunar beams. Surveying the assembled faces, she saw not mere survivors, but architects, tillers, mentors, protectors. More than just a colony, they were a community. Kai stepped forward, bearing a simple, hand-carved staff, the emblem of authority and Hope's stand. That he spoke of Thorn's valor, his compassion, his unwavering faith in humanity's potential. He extolled Anya's fortitude, her resilience, her dedication to the settlement. Commander Petrova, his voice boomed across the square. Do you accept the responsibility of leading Hope's stand? Do you pledge to safeguard its people, to guide them toward a brighter tomorrow, to never relinquish hope, even when shrouded by darkness? Anya inhaled deeply, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Thorn's final charge echoed within her. Protect them, Anya. They are our future. I do, she affirmed, her voice ringing with conviction. I accept the responsibility. That I swear to protect the people of Hope's Stand. That I swear to guide them toward a brighter tomorrow. That I swear to never abandon hope, while breath remains within me. Kai offered the staff. Anya accepted it, her fingers closing around the smooth, time-worn wood. She lifted the staff skyward, a symbol of unity and resistance. Hope's Stand will endure, she proclaimed, her voice resonant. We will not be erased, we will not be broken, we will fight for our survival, we will build a future worthy of our sacrifices, we will never surrender to despair. A roar erupted from the colonists, a sonic wave that engulfed her, infusing her with purpose and determination. She was not solitary. An entire colony, a thriving community, stood steadfastly behind her, prepared to confront whatever trials lay ahead. Later, as the revelry subsided, and the colony settled into a peaceful hum, Anya stood on the observation deck, her gaze lost in the star-strewn expanse. The twin moons cast elongated shadows across the landscape, painting the snow-dusted plains in shades of argent and umber. She pondered Earth, a distant cerulean sphere, a symbol of a home she might never reclaim. Her thoughts drifted to the events unfolding there, the battles waged, the sacrifices made. To secure coalition communication flared to life on her console, direct from Earth. Anya braced herself for another requisition, another demand for personnel. Instead, it was a pre-recorded message from General Thorn. Not the Thorn she mourned, but a visage captured months earlier, before his final mission. His face bore more lines, but his eyes retained the indomitable fire she knew so well. Anya, he began, his voice tinged with weariness yet firm. If you're receiving this, it signifies change. It signifies Hope's Stand endures, and it signifies you are at the helm. He paused, a wistful smile touching his lips. I always recognized your inner strength, a resilience akin to that of the trailblazers who first ventured into this galaxy. Never allow anyone to diminish your capabilities. Never concede that Hope's Stand lacks worth. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. The coalition, they're ensnared in their own conflicts, their own agendas. They overlook the inherent value of every life, the integral role each colony plays in humanity's tapestry. You must remind them, Anya, you must demonstrate that Hope's Stand merits defense. He sighed, weariness evident. I'm laboring to effect change from within, a Sisyphean endeavor against bureaucratic inertia, but I remain steadfast. I pledge you that. He smiled once more, a reassuring gesture. Remember, Anya, you are not alone. You command the allegiance of Hope's Stand, and you possess my unwavering confidence. That alone can topple mountains. The recording concluded, leaving Anya staring at the dormant screen, her soul brimming with a blend of renewed hope and steadfast resolve. Thorn continued the fight, even from beyond the grave, and so would she. Her gaze returned to the stars, drawn to the remote constellations, a perpetual reminder of the universe's immensity, the boundless possibilities that lay beyond the tangible horizon. The KRYLL came to mind, their incessant attacks, their seemingly inexhaustible numbers, the formidable adversary, yet not unconquerable. They possessed weaknesses, vulnerabilities, which she would uncover. She would deploy her expertise, her skill set, her experience to safeguard her people. She would cultivate alliances, advance technological frontiers, and exploit every conceivable advantage. She would guide Hope's Stand to victory. That a fresh message materialized on her console. This time, the communication was from Thorn, the elder statesman, who had orchestrated a provisional increase in supply. Shipments to Hope's Stand, evidence of his unwavering advocacy. Anya, the message commenced. I've secured a modest aid package for Hope's Stand. That it's a beginning. Prioritize bolstering your defenses and expanding hydroponics. Long-term, self-sufficiency is paramount. He paused, his expression growing somber. Furthermore, I'm campaigning for reforms to the Coalition's resource allocation practices. Progress is incremental, yet undeniable. That I'm contending that every colony, every human life, is intrinsically valuable, irrespective of strategic import. He sighed. The opposition is formidable, Anya. Many dismiss Hope's stand as a lost cause, arguing that resources are better allocated elsewhere. But I refuse to yield. I owe it to you, to the population of Hope's stand, and to Thorn's memory. A flicker of his old self illuminated his features. Persist, Anya. Innovate. Prove them wrong. Remember, you are not forgotten. Anya felt a surge of renewed tenacity that Thorn's actions on Earth, however limited, constituted a lifeline. She would not fail him. She would not fail Hope's stand. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, composing a swift reply. General Thorn, your support is deeply appreciated. We will not squander it. We are diligently reinforcing our defenses and amplifying our self-reliance. That we will continue to fight, to innovate, and to validate our worth. She paused, adding a personal addendum. And General, we will never forget. She transmitted the message, then turned once more to the stars. The faint light of distant galaxies shimmered across the night, a beacon of hope cutting through the dark. She closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and silently pledged her resolve. She would defend the people of Hope's stand. She would steer them towards a brighter future. She would never relinquish hope, and she would make Thorn proud. Anya opened her eyes, resolution blazing within them. The stars seemed to echo her sentiment. She was prepared. Whatever awaited, she stood ready. Hope's stand stood ready.